G'day, mate. 40 here. So Israel has enjoyed stunning success versus Hezbollah over the past few days. They have killed all of Hezbollah's senior military leadership, right? The spiritual leader of Hezbollah, right, Sheikh Nasrallah, is still there. But all the senior military leadership is gone, killed, dead. And may well be that Israel will humiliate Hezbollah into submission. Just a stunning turn of events with these pager attacks. Just imagine such a targeted attack. So you're setting off explosives with pagers held only by Hezbollah's battalion commanders. It's hard to think how you could become more precise in your targeting. And overwhelmingly, it was only Hezbollah members who were injured. And for most, they're simply maimed. But now Israel can graph, right, who is a battalion leader in Hezbollah. They can track who went to the hospital. And many of these Hezbollah leaders who are looking forward to invading Israel and raping Israeli women, well, they ended up having their balls blown off by these pages. So there's an absolute humiliation for Hezbollah because it didn't just happen to their pagers. It happened the next day with their walkie-talkies. And then on Friday, Israel bombed and took out 16 of the leaders of Hezbollah's elite Radwan unit. And these stunning successes that you see from Israel over the past few days is an example of what you can expect when you have a war where one side has a standard deviation to a standard deviation and a half in average IQ over the other side. Now, is Hezbollah a terrorist group, and is that useful? Yes, the label is useful because what exactly what have Hamas and ISIS contributed to the world? Hamas, Hezbollah, right? ISIS, right? These people focus on trying to kill as many civilians as possible, while Israel focuses on killing the terrorists. And as a byproduct, in trying to defend themselves from terrorism, they inadvertently will kill some civilians. But for the people like Hezbollah and Hamas, their focus is on taking out civilians. On the other hand, right, these labels are just metaphors that we give for reality. And Hezbollah and Hamas and ISIS are reactions by certain people at a certain point of time to specific situations. And if the situation changed, then the tactics and preferred policies of the people who are currently supporting Hezbollah, Hamas, and ISIS would change. For example, the more hopeless the Palestinians feel about their situation, the more likely they are to support terrorism. Now, the track record of Palestinians is not stellar in terms of contributions to society. And if you want to predict how a particular group will behave, right, looking at past behavior is a pretty good heuristic. But if the Palestinians get their own state, right, if they feel safe and secure, I suspect they will be consistently less supportive of terrorism, and they will make more contributions to the world. There's not some intrinsic quality in any people that just makes them incapable of contributing to the world. But when people feel desperate, they are going to turn for desperate solutions. So many interesting comments on what happened with Israel. Let's get this commentary here from Times Radio.
That whatever they're planning in southern Lebanon, I don't think it's an all-out war, but it's a significant incursion, could prompt Hezbollah to use those high-trajectory weapons, and they could be directed at Israeli population centers, key infrastructure projects, electricity grids, water purification centers. And if that happens, then you're going to end up in a major confrontation.
All right, this is former U.S. Middle East negotiator Aaron David Miller. So Hezbollah's down but not out. They are humiliated, but they still retain some formidable weaponry. Now, if they lose all of their senior leadership, that is devastating because for a lower IQ group like Hezbollah, right, they are more dependent on leadership. Right, a great college football coach, high school football coach, National Football League coach will have to deal with a lot of low IQ people. So he has to break down his game plan and make it work for people with 90 and 95 IQ levels. And effective senior leadership for Hezbollah, right, they were able to break down their game plan for people with below average IQs when, say, compared to Europeans. And with the loss of these senior members of Hezbollah's leadership, the replacements are not going to be nearly as effective. All right, you knock out your opposing team's starting quarterback, 95% of the time, the backup quarterback is not going to be nearly as effective, and the same will go for senior leadership. Right? If the new leadership of Hezbollah were as effective or more effective than the people who were leading Hezbollah prior to getting killed, right, they would have been in the leadership position already. So loss of leadership means a great deal more when you're leading troops with a below average IQ, which is the state with Hezbollah.
Which will involve pro-Iranian militias in Iraq and Syria attacking them, U.S. forces there. The Houthis will get involved in launching their ballistic missiles. And eventually, it's only a hop, skip, and a jump to an Israeli-Iranian sustained confrontation, which I cannot imagine would occur without the involvement.
Aaron David Miller is the former Middle East negotiator for the US and senior fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Aaron, hello. Welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
Hi. And then the UK Foreign Secretary this evening, meeting his US, French and other counterparts in Paris, he's called for a ceasefire, and others have called for calm. To what extent is this just performative? Because they know Israel's going to ignore them. They feel they've got Hezbollah on the run, and Hezbollah wants to respond to this humiliation.
I wrote these talking points for half a dozen American secretaries of state. I think it's largely performative. It's necessary, but in terms of any of these talking points, whether it's Tony Blinken's well-intentioned calls or Foreign Secretary Lammy's calls, it's not going to make much difference. All you got to do is look at the last 11 months. And what you see is a divided, distracted, self-interested international community having almost no impact whatsoever on changing the trajectory of either the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in the south, the Israeli...
There may be no political solution to this conflict, all right? It may require a military solution, and you only have war when you have a difference of opinion about your capability versus your opponent's capability. And right now, there seems to be a significant difference of opinion about who's more capable, who's more dangerous. And over the past few months, I noticed that Israel keeps ramping up while Hezbollah and Iran, all right, keep holding back from retaliation. So it seems clear, and I've been repeating this theme for months, Israel is eager for a wider escalation of this conflict. I think I've said that all of 2024, while Iran and Hezbollah, they seem quite reluctant to engage in a more intense level of this war.
Hezbollah conflict in the north, or frankly, the Iranian-Israeli conflict. What we have here is 3 wars of attrition. They have no political solutions to them. At best, it's a management enterprise if external powers are lucky enough and skillful enough. But right now, I'm afraid, I see risk readiness, certainly on the part of the Israelis, who I think are determined to break the linkage that Hezbollah has created between their own attacks on Israel as part of the axis of resistance and what's happening in Gaza. In other words, the Israelis, I think, believe there will be no ceasefire agreement. No question about that. Neither Yahya Sinwar or Benjamin Netanyahu, neither of them are interested in signing any kind of ceasefire. Therefore, Hezbollah has the luxury of continuing their attacks on the Israelis under the guise of supporting the Palestinian resistance as part of the axis of resistance. And I think the Israelis, number one, are trying to break that linkage. Number two, you do have the very real problem on both sides of the border, right? 170,000 Israelis and Lebanese have been dislocated from their homes. And clearly, since there's no viable government in Lebanon, the pressure on the current Israeli government is mounting to try to find a way to deal with the Northern Front so that these people can return home. And then you have Benjamin Netanyahu's political calculations. Last point I would make. Sorry to drone on.
Okay.
But the reality...
Okay, get a little more commentary here
feeling
on Israel
in
versus
Israel
Hezbollah.
that sort of the red lines have been crossed in terms of Israel's attacks in Lebanon. It's really hitting in the Dakhia and Beirut It's doing things that it wouldn't have done before. Hezbollah has deepened its attacks in retaliation, but still is saying that it's hitting military targets. So it hasn't escalated as much, which what seems to be, some sort of signaling to avoid a larger war. With Israel, it's hard to know what's coming next. We have to see. Just on Friday, we had a huge strike that, killed Ibrahim Akil, a top Hezbollah leader.
Israeli President Isaac Herzog has just said this morning that his country does not want war with Lebanon and insisted that it is fighting.
Okay, this is one of the stupidest media tropes, that it takes what people say at face value. And you particularly see this with regard to celebrities and how even the New York Times will cover them. So the New York Times has a big, long magazine piece on how the acclaimed novelist Sally Rooney, she doesn't care about her career. And so if Sally Rooney says she doesn't care about her career, then obviously that must be true. And you also hear news media coverage of this or that celebrity, they won't give up, or some other cliche. And Israel's president, all right, that is purely a ceremonial position, right? So what the Israeli president says doesn't really matter much. So here's the New York Times. Sally Rooney thinks career growth is overrated because Sally Rooney says it, therefore she must believe it. And because Israel's president says something, therefore it should be treated at face value. This is silly, right? You can't treat what people say at face value, right? People rarely say what they mean and rarely mean what they say.
For its existence. Hezbollah and Israel exchanged rocket fire earlier this morning in one of the most intense skirmishes since the war in Gaza began nearly a year ago. Now, the Israeli military has said that it hit 290 targets inside Lebanon after Hezbollah launched more than 100 rockets at northern Israel. Well, joining us now is Anat Pellet, Wall Street Journal correspondent, speaking to us from Tel Aviv. Anat, thanks for giving us your time.
Thanks for having me.
Anna, can you tell us the latest on the ground? Hezbollah have been firing about 100 rockets into northern Israel, and there's been some casualties.
Yeah, so we've had dozens of warplanes that have struck southern Lebanon on Saturday night and into Sunday morning. And then we had also attacks from Hezbollah, where it retaliated, saying that it hit Israel's Rafael advanced defense systems, which makes Iron Dome, in a location near Haifa, and also another Israeli military airbase. There were some civilian communities hit in Israel, in Kiryat Bialik near Haifa. We are just seeing an escalation. This last week has just been a new phase.
Right. Hezbollah and Hamas and ISIS, they target civilians, right? That is their primary purpose, is to kill as many civilians of the enemy as possible to terrorize the enemy. Israel retaliates by primarily going after the terrorists themselves.
In this war, we're seeing both sides just hitting harder, deeper, and Israel's trying to send a message that a solution has to be reached, or it's going to push to what could be war.
Right. I remember from my raunchier days, I'd get instructions from my partner: gently, 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 harder, deeper, harder, deeper, harder, deeper. And it seems like Israel versus Hezbollah has moved from gently, gently into the harder, deeper phase.
Which could be really devastating to both sides. It's unclear.
And what I recall about the harder, deeper phase, that it very quickly leads to a type of explosion.
Clear if Hezbollah is going to accept that.
But Anat, from what we understand, we heard from the Israeli president. We've also heard from Lebanon as well, that the last thing anybody wants is a full-out war between between Hezbollah and the IDF. So,
right, that's a ridiculous statement. The IDF is itching for a wider war. The United States will likely become involved and protect Israel and supply Israel. The status quo is what Israel doesn't want, right? There are just so many stupid media tropes right now, that just annoying cliches that I see in the media. One of them: Israel doesn't want a wider war, Hezbollah doesn't want a wider war, Iran doesn't want a wider war. Well, there are forces in Iran, in Lebanon, and in Israel that do want a wider war, right? Israel has consistently been the aggressor for months against Iran and Hezbollah, right? Overall, Israel is far more welcoming of a wider war than its adversaries, right? Israel has had spectacular success against Hezbollah, but another media trope I notice is, well, what is Israel's strategy? I don't see any strategic significance to these pager attacks. Well, maiming and slaughtering your enemy before they can maim and slaughter you seems to be a pretty sound strategy. Killing off the entire Hezbollah senior military leadership seems like a pretty strong strategy for me. When you impose a harsh price for attacking Israel, right, you reduce the incentives to attack Israel, right? The left is consistently leery of punishment for violent criminals. The left is outraged by Israel targeting these Hezbollah terrorists. But for people who are not on the left, right, punishment for violent criminals is a normal and natural response. Now, from a left-wing perspective, the desire for revenge is primitive. It's something that we should overcome. But as Dennis Prager notes, all punishment contains an element of revenge. All right, you just want to keep your revenge appropriate to the provocation. There's a terrific statement in the Talmud. You know that somebody is coming to kill you, get up earlier and kill them first. And here's another ridiculous trope that I find in the news media all the time. And that is for X person, this is personal. So here we have Duckworth. Times says, for Duckworth, preserving in vitro fertilization access is personal. Well, who cares if something is personal? Right? What difference does that make to me? Another dumb media trope that I notice is, are the Israeli pager attacks a violation of international law? Well, international law has been substantially reshaped since the 1960s, right, to favor terrorists, to favor initially the Viet Cong, and then to favor the Palestinians, and essentially to favor brown people fighting back against the oppression of white people. And Israel, in the conflict with Arabs and Muslims, has been designated the white country. So when international law changes, yeah, the pager attacks are a violation of international law, but international law is not something that comes down to us from God. In the 1950s, it was primarily people on the right, at least in Europe, who were pushing human rights. But since the 60s, human rights have been taken over substantially by the left, and international law has been reshaped by left-wingers and third world countries in the United Nations to create as many rights as possible for terrorists while making fighting back against terrorists, right? Employing counterinsurgency tactics, make that as difficult as possible because the terrorists are the brown people fighting the oppression of the white people. It's not the deepest kind of analysis.
Have both sides given each other enough room to de-escalate the situation?
Yeah, it's not clear how this is going to happen. I can tell you that there's a lot of pressure here in Israel from, on both sides of the border.
Not everything's amenable to a political solution, right? There's no point preaching forgiveness until there is a political solution. As long as you've got war, right? Both sides are incentivized to keep their in-group identity as strong as possible, to keep their sense of victimization as strong as possible, and to regard the out-group, the enemy, as evil and dangerous as possible.
Tens of thousands of civilians have been evacuated from their homes as a result of the fighting. In Israel, the residents of the north are putting a lot of pressure on the government, telling them, come up with a solution for us. And, there's a lot of push to go towards a war, but this could be devastating. It's unclear if Hezbollah is going to back down, but it seems that Israel's decided to try to escalate, to de-escalate.
We also, of course...
Right, you're often less likely to get peace until there has been a decisive resolution of conflict, right? Until the different perspectives on who's more dangerous, who's more powerful have been resolved on the field of battle, it's often impossible to reach a political solution.
Coming up to 1 year since the October 7th attack, and with what has been going on in northern Israel, we are not hearing much about what's happening in Gaza. So, Anat, is that conversation now been sidetracked, or is that still on the Israeli government's priority list? Because, of course, the two are connected.
Definitely. I think that's a great question. I'll tell you one thing, the hostage families who are fighting and trying to keep this on the agenda feel that the government has kind of left their relatives behind as a result of moving on to the north. But this is an issue. Israel's fighting on multiple fronts. It's fighting Hezbollah, it's fighting in the West Bank, it's fighting in Gaza, and it also has, projectiles coming from Iraq and from Yemen. And so it's kind of, risks spreading thin. And there's a lot of people saying that, we're splitting attention, but the government says it's aimed towards its war goals, and those include, defeating Hamas and retrieving the hostages.
In further escalations now between Hezbollah and the IDF, are they observed?
About 12 years ago, Israel traded over 1,000 Palestinian terrorists to get back one lousy soldier. One of the people that Israel traded to get back their one lousy soldier was Yahya Sinwar, who has been leading the fight against them. I'd hope Israel doesn't make such a lopsided hostage deal again, right? You can't give up the world to get your hostages back. Moral values exist in a constellation, and rescuing hostages, wonderful value, but there are competing values. You don't want to incentivize more terrorism, enable more terrorism against you in the process of rescuing your hostages.
Observing rules of restraint in your view at the moment, or are we going to see more attacks like we saw with the pagers and the walkie-talkies?
Right. It's sort of, there's this feeling in Israel that sort of the red lines have been crossed in terms of Israel's attacks in Lebanon. It's really hitting in the Dakhia and Beirut. It's doing things that it wouldn't have done before. Hezbollah has deepened its attacks in retaliation, but still is saying that it's hitting military targets. So it hasn't escalated as much, which what seems to be, some sort of signaling to avoid.
So overwhelmingly, the Israeli population is behind the pager attacks and is behind doing whatever is necessary against Hezbollah to return 60,000 plus Israelis to their homes in northern Israel.
A larger war. With Israel, it's hard to know what's coming next. We have to see just on.
Well, it's pretty clear there is a strong trajectory for what Israel is doing right now. And Israel is consistently escalating. And Hezbollah and Iran are not stepping up to meet the intensity of Israelis' escalation. They are just absorbing enormous losses.
Is that Prime Minister Netanyahu does not want a regional war, which we could see.
I don't think that's true. All right, there'd be many advantages for Israel for a wider regional war. It would perhaps enable them to push unwanted Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank into other countries such as Jordan and Egypt.
Power, he's either going to face two very bad outcomes. Number one, a conviction and maybe jail time, or a plea deal, which will end his political career.
Well, so he's prepared to make.
So the Ashkenazi left-wing elite have tried to do everything they can to ruin and stop Bibi Netanyahu. So the tech sector in Israel, much of the leadership of the IDF, academia, and the judicial system are all dominated by a left-wing Ashkenazi elite who have to face the fact that Bibi Netanyahu has formed a coalition with their enemies, with the Sephardim and the Mizrahim, the Middle Eastern and Southern European Jews, to create the most right-wing government in Israel's history.
Weapons of varying ranges, lethalities, and precisions, particularly the precision-guided munitions. And remember, this is not Iran, where it takes 12 minutes for a cruise missile to travel from Tehran into Israeli airspace. Hezbollah launches their high-trajectory weapons, of which they have 150 to 200,000 of them. You're talking 90 seconds. But it works both ways, because Hezbollah is incredibly vulnerable to escalation dominance, which the Israelis control.
So escalation dominance has been Israel's primary strategy for 60 years, meaning that if you attack Israel, it's going to fight back in a particularly dominant and harsh way. It's going to overreact to your provocation. So when October 7 happened, and for months afterwards, I was humiliated by what I saw as the ineptitude of Israel's response. And then only in the last month, I've come to realize that any country with borders, with another country on its borders, is vulnerable to attack, because you simply cannot maintain enough armed forces on your borders to repel any attack. It's simply not logistically possible. And so what deters countries from attacking other countries is the price that they will pay for the attack. So it was inevitable once Hamas reached a certain level of planning that they would be able to overrun Israel's defenses, because it's just not logistically possible for Israel to keep sufficient forces on its borders. No country can. What deters attacks is the response to an invasion. And now that Israel has responded, gone into Gaza, and done it with far fewer casualties than was expected, right? Several hundred casualties on Israel's part. Over 40,000 Gazans apparently have died, and close to 20,000 Hamas fighters have been killed. Israel has returned now to its longtime strategy of escalation dominance. Now, Israel's fighting a large number of enemies, and so it didn't always respond with escalation dominance in the first few months after the October 7 attack, but now Israel's returning to its traditional policy of escalation dominance.
For the Israelis is that whatever they're planning in southern Lebanon, I don't think it's an all-out war, but it's a significant incursion, could prompt Hezbollah to use those high trajectory weapons, and they could be directed at Israeli population centers, key infrastructure projects, electricity grids, water purification centers. And if that happens, then you're going to end up in a major confrontation, which will involve pro-Iranian militias in Iraq and Syria attacking U.S. forces there. The Houthis will get involved in launching their ballistic missiles. And eventually it's only a hop, skip, and a jump to an Israeli-Iranian sustained confrontation, which I cannot imagine would occur.
So China is Iran's primary protector, and China does not want a wider regional war because Iran has oil processing facilities that can be relatively easily knocked out, which would overnight double the price of oil, which would primarily affect China. The United States is primarily an energy exporter, not an energy importer. So if the price of oil doubles, the American economy will be fine. But on the other hand, China would be devastated. Okay, Dooovid, it's been a while since I've talked to you. What's on your mind today?
Okay, well, God forbid the war.
Yeah.
Been following that almost a year now, but saw the updates yesterday, and God forbid the escalation this week, Israel and the bombings and the cell phone and the sabotage, and God forbid, pretty disastrous. And if you wanted some analysis of because I've been following his hours every day and the different experts, so I saw you were covering it. So if you wanted some analysis, I thought I'd hop on.
Yeah. Give me that part of analysis where you think, in particular, that the conventional wisdom might be wrong.
Well, I don't think there is conventional wisdom on this. I mean, because if you look at it realistically, even what you were saying, I mean, Israel is basically in a bind. Like you were saying, like, you don't really want to have that strategy of escalatory retaliation on your border. You'd rather have peace on your border. But the problem is, if you think like the United States or Europe, the liberal West, the price of having peace with your neighbors is an open immigration policy where the people could come into your society and join it. So that's why we have the immigration crisis. But we don't really have war at the border, because why are you going to wage war at a border that you're free to cross? So Israel obviously can't have Zionism and an open border. So because if Israel creates a better society than the neighbors, there are really only two options: either there's going to be conflict, or you have to open up the border for the people to join your society. So Israel has had perpetual war basically for 75 years, and has, what you said, they've relied on deterrence theory, basically escalatory tit for tat. All the military experts, Hezbollah the last year has basically been tit for tat. And I mean, most experts think that Hezbollah was basically created by, I mean, it was combined forces, but by Palestinians who had been expelled from Israel. And so I mean, Israel's really in a bind. So if you look, it has strategic goals and it has, wishes and possibilities. And unfortunately, it might be unlikely they could achieve any of it. So, like, obviously, what Israel would like to do is completely destroy the Axis, Iran, and all of their proxies, get a regime change, and become completely recognized by the Arab nations. They would still have the difficulties because they wouldn't liberalize immigration policy. But like, in order to do that, you need a regional war, you need regime change in Iran, and that seems extremely unlikely. Secondary to that, what Israel would like, just to go back to the status quo, is to push. I believe it's called the Litani River. So over the
Yeah.
last time, like it's only about 20 kilometers, or it's not much.
It's like
but
7 miles into Lebanon.
Yeah, but I guess geographically there's like a mountain range, and it gives Hezbollah a strategic advantage that they pushed forward to it, so that they basically Israel, they haven't militarily lost the territory in northern Israel, which was disputed anyways. But saying Israel had won in previous wars territory up to the Litani River, and then there was a buffer zone. But basically, Hezbollah has taken some of that territory back, and through the firing of missiles, they've forced Israel to evacuate from northern Israel, or else Israel would be facing serious casualties. And so they've been able to avoid those casualties by evacuating. So Hezbollah, if you want to look like on a tit for tat basis, yeah, like Israel's dealing like 10-1 blows. And even like, you hear that Hezbollah is launching rockets. I mean, I think the statistics are actually 85% of the rockets have been fired from Israel into Lebanon. And like, if you look at the New York Times map, that Israel's actually like dropped like thousands and thousands of these 2,000-pound bombs all across the southern area, and they've destroyed like half of the buildings. But basically the same strategy, where Hezbollah has built these underground tunnel networks. So even though they've destroyed all the most of the overground infrastructure, and actually a way bigger region than, I think Israel's actually dropped more bombs in southern Lebanon than it has in Gaza, it hasn't changed the fact that Hezbollah is still operative there. So Israel's in a tough place to say, not that Hezbollah has the power to come in and with troops and take over the territory that Israel has evacuated, but Israel really has no power to send the people back unless they defeat Hezbollah. In order to do that, they have to do a ground campaign, and because of the military asymmetry, um, Israel's basically doing what it can do. If you want to call the bombings in Beirut, or the cell phone, in the pager explosions, like if you want to call it brilliant, or you want to call it terrorism, and the bombing, but Israel doesn't want to do conventional warfare, and basically Hezbollah is like Hamas. They're trying to bait Israel into a ground war, because Israel's missiles are like 10 times more powerful than Hezbollah's. They really are. So most of the experts say that it's a strategic patience that the Axis is using to continue this as long as possible. And basically that's the the concept of the Iranian, the big and little Satan, that the only way for the Axis to defeat Israel is to get America to stop supporting Israel, and that would either be through the downfall of the United States, or for the United States to decide to stop supporting Israel. And so they figured the longer they could drag this on, the worse Israel's international reputation, the less support the citizens of the United States will have for the continued operations in Israel. Maybe Israelis will become demoralized. So therefore, you have Netanyahu and Israel pushing, like, you got to end this now. You got to do something. You got to, because if you look at it, you could look like, okay, is Israel defeating, winning, or losing? And to some extent, like, Israel's losing this war. They've lost territory, and they're in no position to get this territory back. And so it's been a year now, and Israel's lost, a significant amount of territory in the north that they've had to evacuate. There appears to be no sign that they're going to be able to send the people back unless they, basically invade Lebanon. And, so now Israel is in this bind. And basically, Israel has done everything really it can short of a ground invasion in Lebanon. And, because it's like, what's another year of dropping bombs? Are they going to drop bigger bombs? Are they going to, is it going to be a deterrence to start bombing, Beirut? Probably not, because like even the bombing of the be a deterrence. The Hezbollah pager bombing of the operatives, the officials in Beirut. They still have their militia force that's basically like Hamas. That the rockets being fired into Israel, those are coming out of tunnels and out of fortifications. They're probably prepared for like 10 years, and like they say, like Nasrallah's Hezbollah's strategy is really to bait Israel into an invasion, because then the military supremacy asymmetry will be less of an advantage, and then Hezbollah might be able, like the 2006 war, to extract some casualties. Then you also have the increasing other Iranian proxies that might join the battle. The question of Russia, now that it's much more aligned with Iran, and China and the regional. You see the UN vote that Israel's becoming less and less popular. So it's tough to see.
Okay, Dooovid, let me get. Is that Fahad? Is that you, buddy? I got Palestine, Mr. Palestine. Did you want to say something? Okay. I brought Palestine in, but he doesn't want to say anything.
He might just be frozen for a second.
Fahad, is that you?
Yeah, I'm right here.
Okay, bro. What do you want to say about Israel versus Hezbollah?
He just mentioned something really important when he was talking about 2006. Do you know what happened in 2006?
Yeah, Israel and Hezbollah went to war.
Israel went to the United Nations begging them to stop the war. Yeah, and then Israel went to the United Nations begging to stop the war. And that time, Hezbollah had 10% of what it has to. I'm not bragging here. One sec.
Okay, so we'll try to get Fahad back when we get a little better quality.
I've been doing constant Twitter spaces, and most of them are with anti-Israel people, because like the Jewish Twitter spaces aren't going to invite me on or don't like me. So I've developed frenemy type relationships with multiple Twitter spaces, and a lot of them are international. You get people all over the world, interesting details.
Okay, sorry, dude. Let me try to get Fahad. Fahad, go ahead. Jump in with your thoughts. Sorry, dude.
Yeah. So, okay. Sorry, but the way you tried to explain it today, like Hezbollah is in for no reason or something, or it's an enemy for a long time. No, today is because of what's happening in Gaza, right? Same thing with the Yemenis. The Americans tried to separate these two subjects, like Israel has each one differently. Each one is coming out to you openly telling you, stop the war in Gaza, I'll stop anything I have against you. Do you know what I'm saying? You want to separate them and keep the war in Gaza going, that's not going to happen. And that's what pissed off. That's what John Kirby said yesterday. He goes, what pissed off the Israelis the most was what Hassan Nasrallah said yesterday. And what he said exactly was that. He goes, yo, listen, if you can bring your people back to the borders, then you won. I don't think they can bring them back. There is more than 80,000 people who can't go back to them. Other than that, it's just a war. It's an open war. Anything could happen. Pages, walkie-talkies, that's just part of the war. Like what happened today when they hit Haifa, that's just part of the war. You want to tell me you proved your point? You won your point? It's by bringing your people back to the borders. And I could bet you anything, Luke, they could never bring them back to the borders without sitting down with Hezbollah or stopping the war at Gaza. because Hassan Nasrallah would never let that go. And it's not only him, by the way. Iraqi militants won't let it, Yemenis. Even if he says it, there's someone else who's going to take over. Let me just say one more thing, okay? Please. Hezbollah is controlling the borders with Israel. Like the way they fight, they're literally in a government war. There's the Iraqi guy, they call him.
Okay, Fahad, your connection's just too bad. Is there a place that you can go where you can get
Rocky
better
Rambo,
connection?
I don't know if you've heard of him. His name is Abu Israel. He went to the borders as soon as 7th of October happened. He goes, they won't let us. You mean?
Okay, Fahad, I haven't been able to hear almost anything you've tried to say the last 2 minutes. Is there any way that you can get to a place with better reception? Okay. Why am I? Okay, I have to remove Fahad, just the technical quality. But Dooovid, talk to me about your Twitter Spaces with a wide variety of people.
Okay, I just mentioned the tit for tat, but before, and my sober analysis without picking sides is the tit for tat between Israel and Lebanon so far this last year has favored Israel about 10-1, meaning that Israel extracts about 10 times as much damage as Hezbollah does in terms of casualties, injuries, damage to building and infrastructure, but Hezbollah has seen it worthwhile carrying out this extended tit for tat, even though the 10-1. Is it possible that Israel could escalate it and make it 25-1? Does Hezbollah have the ability to, if Israel escalates, to escalate the damage that they're doing? We'll see. That's what happened today, and Israel might be hoping that if they escalate the tit for tat to 25-1, that Hezbollah will back down, or maybe not. And I think most experts think that if Israel actually does a ground invasion, that the tit for tat will probably decrease to only 2 or 3-1, and that's why Hezbollah wants to bait Israel into a ground invasion. And probably Fahad, that's what he would say is that God forbid, Hezbollah is probably going to keep it up even if they're losing 25-1, because what are the from their
Okay, let me see if I can get Fahad back. Fahad, let's try you again. Okay, that's better. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. To be honest, I don't want to go back to the main story, but we have to. What's happening? If you're gonna go explain what's happening to anyone right now, why is all this happening? Right? Look, you could look at it from your way, up to you. You want to take it as the way you want it. There's people living there for thousands of years. I get it. The Jews were kicked out, but they didn't kick them out. They have nothing to do with it. These people living there. You come there and tell them to leave their houses, kick them out of the area. What do you expect? No, seriously, if someone done that to you or to anyone, what do you expect them to do? Now, 7th of October was bad. A lot of innocent people died, everything. It happens. That's what's happening right now. 45,000 people died, 12,000 of them are kids. It happens. To me, I don't get emotional about what's happening. All I'm saying is these people are still fighting back. And now you're fighting the strongest out of them, which is Hezbollah. Hezbollah is not a joke. If Hezbollah was a joke, Israel would have went in since the 8th of October. But they know Hezbollah is not a joke. And by the way, Hezbollah has been fighting in Syria all these years. They're experienced. They're not just the people you have on rankings. They have India, the 3rd strongest army. If you put India into a war, they won't win. That's the whole point. That's why we had Russia, the 2nd strongest army. They can't beat a couple of Ukrainians. Listen to me. This is real. These guys fought all these years. They know what they're doing, and they have the right weapons. And we saw that today. Do you know what I'm saying? This is not, oh, Israel's strong. Yeah, we know Israel's strong. Hassan Nasrallah said, we know Israel's strong. Technology, we know that. Their country. Do you know what I'm saying? These guys are meant to be small militants that you could just walk past. How come you can't do that? How come you still can't get your hostages back from Gaza? What's happening? That's the point. Do you know what I'm saying? Don't flip it like their country's fighting or something. It's not like that. It's small militants, but fighting for their freedom, to get their land back. Sit down with them, give them their land. The Americans are begging you to do it. Everyone's begging you to do it. You don't want to do it, including Trump. Listen to me. Go watch the Trump video where he goes, I thought Palestinians were the people who didn't want the land. He goes, when I sat down with them, Mahmoud Abbas wanted it, but Netanyahu didn't want it. So I don't know what to say. You know what I'm saying? Make it sound like Israel is the best and there's most democracy in the Middle East. Do whatever you want to do. There is facts you can't pass. These are facts. People living on their land for years. You came, they took you in. A lot of them took you in. Go listen to Gigi Hadid and all these girls. A lot of them actually took you in to help you out after World War II. And I'll show you pictures where it says, be nice to us after what Hitler done to us. And then you took their land, kicked them out of their land. Now, they're not asking for a lot. They're asking for the 20%. You still don't want to do it? They're going to fight you back, bro. Trust me, man. Trust me, because there's religion mixed in there. That's what got the Israelis to win at the start, was their religious militant. You know what I'm saying? Now you're having the same but in a different religion. That's it. Go check when King David Hotel got bombed. Check who bombed it.
So
I don't know how you guys look here. How you're going?
Yeah. So do you think most Lebanese are supportive of Hezbollah, or do you think more and more Lebanese hate Hezbollah?
Okay. Now, let me. That's see. I love that point. That happened. Okay. Now let me ask you this: do you think most Israelis love Netanyahu, or do they hate Netanyahu? See, it works both ways, bro.
Yeah,
it's not like you cut them out. No. I have it. I'll show you. I'll show you the percentage. There are only people. There's only 40% who are supporting, even 30% who are supporting Netanyahu in this. So I beg you, don't make it like it's something you caught them out. Yeah, no one likes you. No, it's not like that. 100%. No one likes to bomb their country. I'm from Iraq. I don't think Iraq should get involved in this. Do you know what I'm saying? Because I don't want Iraq to be bombed up. They already got bombed up. We just started building again. I went Iraq twice this year. I get it, 100%. Any Lebanese don't want it. It's not like you caught them out or you're clever or something. No. But there is facts. They're there to fight back. You like it, you don't, they're going to fight back, bro. I don't know how to explain it. Netanyahu doesn't think there should be a Palestinian country. And that's our biggest problem with him and Smotrich and Ben Gvir. That's our problem. That's why there was no problem before that. Do you know what I'm saying? There was a ceasefire for a very long time, even though there was blockade. People allowed it, everything was good. But when you push it to Smotrich coming into the mosque, that's you're pushing it with me. I'm going to react back. Do you know what I'm saying? Yes. I don't know. Okay. I don't know. You know, I don't know. I don't have to explain no more. But yeah, that's my point. If you have any questions, I got you.
Yeah, back to my question about Lebanon. Do you think most Lebanese support Hezbollah, or do you think most Lebanese are opposed to Hezbollah?
Okay, now let me tell you this. Hezbollah is the scariest thing you have. Do you know why? Bro, I lived in a couple of countries and stuff. I've seen Lebanese. The Lebanese that love Hezbollah, bro, they look at him as God, Hassan Nasrallah. They're the hardest people to beat. They're not Iraqis where you could buy them with money. They're not these guys. They actually believe in what they believe in. I don't know how to explain it, bro. Trust me. I'm not trying to big them up or nothing. I'm Iraqi. I should be bigging up Iraqis. But I swear, Iraqis, you could buy them. Lebanese, you can't. Yo, they believe in this shit a bit too much. Like we joke around about it. Even religion-wise, they're Shia, right? They believe in that Shia mentality a bit too much. It's hard to beat, bro. With Palestinians, it's the worst mix that you guys have. Iraqis are brave. Yemenis are brave. But Palestinians are very intelligent. And I think they got that from the Jews. Because they have the Jewish blood in them. You know what I'm saying? They're very, very, very intelligent. It's hard to be intelligent and brave at the same time. Very hard. Palestinians, it's like, I don't know, it has to be a miracle for you to kick out 6 million Palestinians out of their land. I don't know what you're going to do. Yani if you beat Hamas, you bought Fatah before, right? You got them to sign with you, Oslo, everything was good. And then Hamas came up. You know what I'm saying? There's no way out, bro. If they don't get their land, let me tell you how it works with Palestine. Do you want to fix it? Let me tell you something. When the Palestinians see that they have their land, they have their country, they're going to fight Hamas for you. You don't even need to fight Hamas. Just give them what they need. Iraqis today will fight the government if government goes into war. You know why? Because everyone has nice cars, they have houses, they're living their life, everything's good. They'll literally go up to any government and tell them, why the fuck you starting a war? You need to do that with Palestine. That's the only way, trust me, bro. Other than that, you're gonna go around in circles for the next I don't know how many years. There's no way out. You told me a way where you could kill 6 million, even if you kill them, you have Libyans, you have Algerians, you have Yemenis, bro, it's a circle. The only way out is by giving them something so you could say, yo, I gave you, you're done, that's it. I get it. Israel doesn't want to do that for security reasons, but
so what would
there must be a way out. The Americans come in, start a little border.
Yeah. What would a Palestinian state look like? What would be its borders approximately?
Literally, Gaza. They don't want too much. Hamas, listen, a lot of people use this. Hamas said we don't believe in borders. No. They changed it, and they had a problem with Iran about this. They said we're willing to go with the borders of 1967. Just give them back 67 is yesterday. I'm not asking thousands of years ago. Give them back the 67 borders. And then if anything happens, that's when you have the green light from the whole world. That's when South America would never stop dealing with you. Colombia are not sending you coal. All these countries are not dealing with you. South Africa's starting war with you. Turkey has a problem with you. All this world, they're not all stupid. They're not all Hamas. They're not all fucking mental. No. They just tell you, yo, by the way, give them their land, and then I'll be with you if they fight you. Does that make sense? Norway is not Hamas. Finland is not Hamas. But they came out and said, no, there should be a Palestinian country. Does that make sense in a way? I beg you, don't make it like the whole world is Hamas and the whole world is terrorists and they hate us. And then give them their country, then tell me, why they're fighting. But once in the United Nations, you are an occupying power, tough luck. This is gonna happen, brother. Do you know what I'm saying? Americans understand that. When that ever happened to them in Iraq, they understood it. You guys don't want to understand that you're occupying and you don't want them to fight back. What the fuck is this? What do you think this is? Happy ending? Doesn't work that way. Trust me, man. When someone lost their house, lost their land, I've been working all my life to go buy a house and land. And then you come and take it and you expect me to take it with a smile? Are you stupid? Seriously, like, is something wrong with you guys? What do you think? Because you're white, you could just take over? Doesn't work that way, brother. It doesn't. Trust me.
Well,
anyway, next question.
Okay, yeah. So I have too much respect for Arabs, Muslims, and Palestinians to think that they would be satisfied with anything less than the complete destruction of the Jewish state. Right? It's not like you just give them. I
swear on my mom's life. Yeah. I swear on my mom's life. Hamas came out in 2017 and said we're willing to take the borders of 1967. I swear on my daughter's life. Go read it, and it's right there. You wanna go past it? It's up to you. There is facts right there. Go read the facts. Go read what Hamas charter says after 2017. Don't try that. Don't try that with me, Luke. Please. There is facts and there's opinions. I get your opinion, but don't use it. Don't use it as a fact. This is the worst ones, the most extreme, right? Hamas, right? And Hamas is telling you, I'm willing to go with the 1967 borders. What do you want more?
I think that's just a tactic.
I beg you, stop with that. Tactic. They stopped talking to Iran for 5 years because of that. It's a tactic. I beg you, brother. No, man. Go read it. It's a charter, man. You listen. Tactics is when I say something and then I go around it. But to have it as a charter, right? That's what Hamas is about. You know what I'm saying? So if I want to join, I should believe in 1967 borders. That's what it says. Because they literally want to be part of the world. It's right there. You want your opinion, I respect it, but I beg you don't make it a fact.
So you're saying that if Israel returned to its 1967 borders, then you could have a Palestinian state and Israel could then live in peace?
No, yeah, I'm going to answer you back with this. In 2001, in Lebanon, Arab nations came out, including Saddam Hussein, the most extreme, right? They said if it goes back to 67 borders, we're willing to deal with Israel. Go read that.
Right.
Go read it. It's fact. I'm not saying no opinion. This is not my opinion. This is fact. Yeah.
Why would you accept that what they're saying is what they really believe? People all the time say things that they don't believe for tactical reasons.
Bro, it's 20, brother, this is 20 countries, and they pressured Hamas to do it. So Hamas done it. Tough luck. Now, what I have on paper is this. You want to deal with this? This is what's there. You want the Palestinians to actually fight Hamas? Wallah, they'll fight them. I swear on my mom's life, because I've seen it in Iraq. Bro, I went to Iraq recently, and I've seen them. They hate something called militants. Nothing personal. They just hate them because they don't like the idea of war. They're like, no, that's it. Do you know why? The worst one is when you don't have nothing to lose. Now Iraqis have something to lose. You should see their cars. They're all G-classes. They live in villas. They live in their life. They're not willing to let it go. That's what Palestinians need. That's the only way out. Other than that, wallah, you're going around in circles. I don't care what you say, what you do, go up, down, left, right. You're going around in circles. This is the only way you're going to get their people to fight them. Because they're not easy, bro. They're 6 million people. By the way, I don't like Hamas. I've always liked Yasser Arafat. But anyway, I'm just saying facts here.
No, I understand what you're saying, that when the circumstances change, Palestinian behavior and political preferences will change.
It's no. It's not that easy. You want to solve the whole problem in the Middle East? Just do that. Don't tell me circumstances make it like it's something basic. No. You're stopping the Yemenis from fighting you. You're stopping the Lebanese. The Lebanese won't have a reason. That's when Lebanese will go fight Hezbollah. Trust me, I swear on my mom's life. That's when Lebanese will come out and be like, what the fuck are you doing? That's it. They have their country. Tough luck.
How would the Arabs be?
I don't know how to explain it, fam. This is
okay.
I don't know.
Hang on. So here I got a question.
Oh
for
yeah.
you.
One more thing. Even the Arabs will be stopping. They'll stop. Listen to me. I swear. That's when you make Iran look like a terrorist. Iran is a terrorist. I don't like. Iran's getting involved in my country. I don't like them. You want to make them look like a terrorist? You made them look like heroes with what you're doing. You want to make them look like terrorists? Who they are terrorists, right? That's how you do it. You have a country, you have your borders, shut the fuck up, that's it. Trust me, bro, and they're telling you. Hamas is saying to you in 2017, I'm willing to go with 67 borders. Listen, you done it with Egypt, you done it with Jordan, right? And with Lebanon, he just left, right? What other countries? Yeah. So why can't you just do it with the Palestinians? Where give them what they want and then use that against them. That's why Egypt can't do nothing right now, because they have an agreement with you. Okay, even though you're killing Palestinians right across from them, right there, Palestinians are dying. Go on.
How would the Arabs and Muslims surrounding the Jewish state be able to deal with the humiliation of a tiny Jewish state that far excels them in economic innovation and prosperity?
Brother, no. I love that. You know, they've been dealing with it since Camp David with Egypt. You know that Anwar Sadat, the biggest Arab country, the strongest Arab country, dealt with you guys, and that's it, happy ending. You know Jordan signed with you guys. You know all the fucking countries surrounding you signed with you guys except Syria. And Syria will sign with you guys once you say it. So there is no humiliation. If there was, it already happened. We had Camp David and it's gone. Right? Now people want to live. You want them to live, give them what they want. Don't be, listen. You know Smotrich and Ben Gvir pushed it too much, you know that, right? Before Hamas done the 7th of October. You know, for 1 year, they were provoking the Muslims there. They were kicking them out. They came in with their boots inside the mosque. You know that, right? You know this happened before 7th of October, right?
Yes. Yes. I know that
Okay,
they were
thank you. I just want to make sure you know that. So you don't make it sound like it just came out. Exactly. So it didn't just come out of nowhere. Right?
I agree.
Okay,
I agree that
I'm not
October
saying it's
7th
right,
didn't
but it didn't come out of nowhere, right?
Correct.
So we're on the same page. Okay.
Yep.
Thank
But
you. Thank you.
how would Arab or Muslims deal with a prosperous Jewish nation?
Yeah, go on.
Yeah,
I just told you. They already dealt with it. Egypt. Brother, I beg you, listen to me. Egypt already signed with you. Jordan signed with you. Morocco signed with you. Emirates signed with you. Saudi Arabia was going to sign with you. But you don't want to give them. And listen to Mohammed bin Salman 2 days ago. He came out. He's the best guy to Israel right now. He's saying, yo, just give them the borders. I'm willing to sign with you. Saudi Arabia is going to sign with you. What do you want more? If Saudi Arabia signs with you, that's it. Yeah, that's it. Everything's dealt with. It's the biggest Islamic country. Ka'ba's there, Mecca's there. All the Muslims listen to Saudi Arabia. Happy ending. That's what I'm saying. There is no humiliation, and you could live in that little bubble. Up to you. It already happened. Make sense? It already happened. Tough luck. It already happened. Even if we don't like it, we like it. It already happened. Since Anwar Sadat went to the Knesset, it happened. That's it.
Okay, so what another way of phrasing what you're saying is that if living in Israel is in the Palestinians' best interests, they will live in peace with Israel. That every group is going to follow their best interests, and for some people, some of the time, going to war is in their best interest, but in different circumstances, living in peace is better.
I'll give you an example. West Bank don't want to fight you because they have something to lose. Even though West Bank is not a country, right? And they're still not fighting, right? Like what happened to Father 1, Father 2, right? You know why? Because the Americans are making sure the West Bank has money to pay its people. And that's the Palestinians. That's not even the Arabs. I'm talking about Palestinians here. And they're not fighting you. Now,
we've lost connection with Fahad again. Okay, we lost.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
now
go ahead.
Sorry.
Okay.
My wife is calling me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Lost you the last 30 seconds.
No,
so.
we have an example. We have an example which is we have an example which is the West Bank. West Bank are not coming out. They're not doing any intifadas for that reason. Because they have something to lose. Gaza was in a blockade. People don't have nothing to lose. They don't care, bro. You know Gaza has the most qualifications.
Okay.
You know that, right? And they can't get jobs. You know Gazans, the people who used to live in Gaza, they can't get a job anywhere in the world. And they have the best qualifications in Palestine. They all have master's degrees. You know that, yeah? So when this happens, they have nothing to lose. But in the West Bank, and they're both Palestinian, in the West Bank, they do have something.
Okay, I'm losing contact with you again. Your sound's gone out.
So they're not fighting you yet. You have just a little group of a guy who's born 96 who's fighting you. That's it. That's all you have. Okay. I beg you, if people have something to lose, they will stop fighting. I swear on my mom's life, I've seen it in more than one country. I've seen it in Iraq. I've seen it everywhere. Iraqis are the worst. They're even worse than the fucking Palestinians. Iraqis been fighting since the 80s. Now they have G classes. They have nice cars. They're not winning. I have kids right now. I would never go to war again. I was thinking of going, but now because I have 2 kids, I would never fight.
Right, and you have a good job, don't you? Partly own a security business.
Yeah, I security company. Yeah, but that's not the point. Trust me. Look, because of these 2 kids, that's why I'm not going. I used to think shahada and go fight for shahada, but when people have something to lose, I swear, bro, trust me. And I told you it's happening right now. Just go check the difference between West Bank and Gaza, and you understand, bro.
Okay,
anyway, bro, I have to go.
Yep.
I'll let you go. And if you have any questions when I come back on next time, I'll talk to you. Thanks.
Okay, sounds good. Take care, bro. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Okay, Dooovid, let's get you back on. Anything that you heard in the last half hour that you want to comment on?
Yeah, I mean, God forbid, Fahad's kind of like the average person I talk to in Twitter spaces. And most of the Twitter spaces I'm on are basically people who heard of me from Adam Green. And so I would say the majority of these, I'm basically the only Jew, or if there are a handful of other Jews, they're so disconnected from their Judaism that they're not really going to argue with me. So the situation, and because I'll make concessions or just not really push back, I don't necessarily spend my time trying to push back against anything that they say. That it's created a situation again where I could be on these panels, sometimes big panels, where I'm basically the only Jew, and almost everybody is counter-Semitic, and there's a few different ones. Most of them, some of them will focus on like the Adam Green stuff. Some of them focus almost exclusively on the war and what Israel is doing and why America is supporting the war. And then there's also a subsection of kind of like European neo-alt-right pagans that main effort is anti-Christian. And because they're Adam Green spin-offs, usually they think, well, like Judaism, Christianity is a Jewish deception, and some in there overlaps, because most of the people will appear in the same spaces, but they'll have different topics. So, but I'm saying Fahad is kind of the energy level of a lot of the international speakers, but you also have some intellectual, like neo-pagan intellectuals, or people that the immigration debate. I mean, there's a lot to unpack if you wanted to, mention when I said, like, Fahad, if you're interpreting what I'm saying, that the U.S. has the West, Canada has avoided this perpetual state of war because Fahad could just join us. So it's like, you're not really at war with these people, might have done it, but like, it's not really them. It's, just some collective that you could become part of. So Israel's never going to be able to have that. Like, so if Israel has a great economy and things booming, they're never going to be able to just integrate anybody who wants to come there. They might be able to have the Abraham Accords and integrate like just the leaders of the Arab nations. Lebanon, from what I understand, the Lebanese army and government is largely supported by the United States. What they want is Hezbollah to surrender to the Lebanese government and army, and then have some sort of agreement like Jordan or Egypt. But maybe that's likely impossible because Hezbollah already has an army and probably hundreds of square miles and tunnels and these bombs. So I mean, my interpretation: Israel's got itself into a war it can't win, and is basically, I mean, if you want to, to go to the full extent, Israel's put itself in a genocide or bust situation. And if you don't want to go to that extent, it's an ethnic cleansing or bust situation. And that's why you come down to, God forbid, the Holocaust, the intentionalist versus the functionalist debate, where you say, well, Israel just wants to ethnically cleanse. They don't really want to commit genocide. But if they can't actually carry out the ethnic cleansing, then they're going to have no choice but to kill the people. And that's why you see the increased escalation. And personally, I don't think Israel is going to be able to survive this war, because I don't think Israel, even though they might be able to extract a 25-1 tit for tat, I think Hamas is almost certainly going to retake over Gaza. There's almost no chance that Israel is going to be able to remove Hezbollah from their northern border, and this perpetual state of war will probably at some point cause Israel to start internally imploding, and the international pressure turning against it as Israel um, ratchets up the violence, and thinking that the only way out of it is to deal so much pain and suffering to the other side that they back down, which I would say is almost guaranteed to fail once you get into that kind of thinking. That's why, God forbid, you get the genocide, and it's usually the opposite, is that it causes more people that want to fight you. So it's a sad situation.
And so part of your motivation for joining these spaces that are so hostile to Jews is you'd like people to realize that many Jews are not Zionist. Is that also what's going on for you?
Yeah, and so usually, like this guy Albert Bashai, who used to stream with Adam Green, he always opens up, like, Dooovid will be on the protected list, once Israel and Zionism falls, Dooovid will be on the protected list. I mean, I guess I'm heartfelt anti-Zionist. So, you could say like, strategically, I mean, because a lot of Jews are anti-Zionist, and I've been basically anti-Zionist since we met. In the situation, when we first met, you were like, oh, okay, you're the anti-Zionist. A lot of Haredi feel like that, but it wasn't such an existential threat. Now to where you see that Israel, might not be able to survive this. It's became much worse. So I guess I'm just saying what I heartfelt thought. You could say strategically, I do think I have the best interest. I don't consider myself anti-Semitic at all. I still spend a lot of time, pushing back against egregiously false anti-Semitic things, or we'll try to, give like kind of, but like the anti-Semitism is definitely, so to say, increased as when Brundle first put me on those panels, even like heel turn, even among the alt-right. I think there was a somewhat overwhelming sympathy, and even like people would message me afterwards, and like my audience was kind of built up by people that thought the people who attacked me went too far, and even the people who attacked me relatively attacked me probably less than they are today. And now I will constantly be in spaces where basically everybody's counter-Semitic, sometimes even hundreds of people, and there's much less sympathy. And saying with like the pager bombing, there's a stronger distrust. Like kind of like, oh, maybe you're hidden Jew, and this kind of feel where you have like the Christopher Ben Jerkness, the over the top counter Semites who are like the secret of Judaism is that they want to kill and enslave the goyim. God forbid, where that's becoming larger and larger as the war escalates and as more and more Jews support it. So I would say, I mean, from my perception, I think the pager bombing is it's probably one of the greatest escalations, if you want to use the word terrorism, or however, it's one of the worst acts of terrorism in the history of the world. Like, okay, 9/11, October 7th, but I mean, just killing maybe tens of people, horribly injuring hundreds of people in this kind of like haphazard way of blowing up pagers at the same time. And the danger where even your local Jewish kids are kind of like backing that and cheering it on. It's became like a sporting event, and it makes it extremely dangerous, for Jews to be in this situation where uh, we're in this war that we can't get out of, and the only way to get out of this war is basically to give up on Zionism or to escalate the violence. And most
So,
Jews,
aside from religious reasons, the primary reason that you are anti-Zionist is that you believe that it's simply a bad strategy for Jews.
yeah, and I think I do think the main symptom of the problem is Zionism. Zionism is kind of like a heresy that doesn't have anything to do with the religion, and the
Wait,
end of
that's a
Zionism.
religious argument. So, aside from religious arguments, why is it that Jews are the one people on earth who should not have their own state?
Well, they're not. I mean, that goes back to like when we started in the alt right, and like Richard Spencer and his white nationalism, and the claim like, well, all I want is a white state, and he's like no, you could only get a white state by killing the non-whites. And so you could argue, just atheistically, politically, that ethno-nationalism necessitates oppressing, ethnic cleansing, and genocide. So like religiously, it's a heresy, and then ethno-nationalism, I'm against it in all aspects, and saying Israel's not the only state that doesn't get to have, like no one besides for. I mean, you could say even pushback like China and the Uyghurs. Everyone's against what China's doing to the Uyghurs. They just can't stop it. But no one in the West has an ethno-national state anymore. Only so it's not like Israel's the only state that doesn't get to have it.
Well, Israel's not an ethno-nationalist state. It contains some elements of that, but it allows tens of thousands of people to move there who are not Jewish and become citizens.
Yeah, but it's not going to. It's not going to do the most, say reasonable, logical thing to end the conflict, which would be to incorporate and assimilate the millions of Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank.
And you think that a non-Jewish state where Jews were just one group of citizens and Muslims and Palestinians were another group, and you just had democratic civil liberties and democratic voting, that that would be a much more viable path forward?
Yeah, because it's like Fahad has been assimilated into the West. And like, okay, I live here in Metro Detroit, and saying like, like we've assimilated these people. Like, like, okay, there's 20,000 Palestinians in Metro Detroit, and there's not really such a phenomenon in the Western, the first world nations, as what's going on in Israel, where you have these millions of people that are stateless. So I mean, you could give comparisons to other places in the world like China or Africa, but there's no place in the West where you have long term these millions of people that haven't been given full rights and citizenship.
Okay, Dooovid, I'm going to move on. Any final words?
Yeah, God bless. I've seen you talking about it, so yeah, I don't necessarily, unfortunately, I think it's a disaster, and it's just going to keep on escalating. That my point about the tit for tat, where you see people like Fahad that are probably likely to continue the fight, and even if it's a 20-1 damage level in the tit for tat, it doesn't seem the escalatory strategy that Israel has been using doesn't seem to be working. So it's unfortunate, but God bless, and nice talking.
Okay, Dooovid, take care. All right, want to get some more commentary here. This is Richard Spencer, but Richard Spencer, the Times of London Middle East correspondent.
Israel did this instead of a ground invasion. This humiliation that Hezbollah has suffered might lead it to say, well, we will do a deal. We will, find some face-saving way of stopping this confrontation.
First the pagers, then the walkie-talkies, and a
very fractured and fragile society anyway has had these. It's had a half century of disaster after disaster, civil war, invasion.
Talking about Lebanon,
interfactional fighting, even when there wasn't the civil war, invasions from Israel, economic collapse in the last 5 years, which means that the power isn't working a lot of the time. A lot of beggars on the streets, a very hostile living environment. Your power goes off, your water doesn't work because the pump doesn't work to pump your water into your house, and suddenly you're stuffed. Suddenly your salary is devalued by 95% because of the collapse of the currency. All these things, and of course that extraordinary explosion at Beirut's port 4 years ago, has left people very much on edge the whole time. It's a very, and you can feel that socially, you can feel that on the streets, you can feel this, sort of sense of perpetual crisis. So that's one very important aspect of this, just the general sense of, everything going wrong all the time. And a general sense of personal fear that anything could happen to you at any time, and you can't really predict it or get away from it. There's nothing you can do about it. Killed, and passers-by, other people standing in the queue at the shops, as you say. So,
Israel's killed all of Hezbollah's senior military leadership.
It's in the annals of this conflict, civilians, as they would say in all conflicts, civilians are often the unintended casualties, but the inevitable casualties of these operations. Make of that what you will in terms of your assessment of.
Okay, let's get Joe into the show. Joe, what's going on?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Hi, Luke. Joe, I'm here in Ohio. A little background about myself. I was in 1985. I was a member of the 82nd Airborne Division, and I was in Israel, and primarily the Sinai, Sharm el Sheikh, for 6 months, deployed in the peacekeeping accord according to the Camp David. I'm sure you're familiar with that.
Yes.
So I spent 6 months there. Went to Israel a couple times. Went to Eilat, Jerusalem, Haifa, Jerusalem, Tel Aviv. Being a Christian, it was a fantastic voyage and all that. And I saw a lot of, and you know, I was convinced that Israel wanted to pursue peace. And you know, I think now, you know, I'm not sure of all the circumstances why we have all this distress right now. I just hope that how should I say it? Better heads would, you know, be able to pursue peace, because it just seems like it's just, you know, everybody's just going at it. And from what I see is Israel will go into a town in Gaza or something like that, arrest somebody or hurt them or something like that. And the guy gets mad and his family gets mad and they go out and throw rocks at the Israelis. And, you know, it's just a constant back and forth. You know, I just think that it's never going to resolve itself. It's just going to be an ongoing struggle. And that's what I see. I mean, I'm not talking about a macro solution, but you know, micro thing. You know, so that's how I look at it as an American.
Right. So you mentioned that life is going to be an ongoing struggle, but life is an ongoing struggle. So, for example, if Israel is going to survive, then it will have to struggle. Life isn't something that's just handed you on a platter. If you want to survive as a people, you have to be prepared to defend yourself and, when necessary, to kill your enemies. So struggle is just an inherent part of life, is it not?
Yes, but why do we have to struggle?
Because life is difficult. There are limited resources, and human desires are infinite.
Well, being a Christian, I mean, we always, you know, we're taught to turn the other cheek and pursue peace and look at things, you know, without going after, you know, without, you know, picking up a sword and attacking. You know, I was a soldier. You know, I had to go to battle. I went to the Grenada War, so, you know, I was prepared to fight. But, you know, it was a very extenuating circumstances. And I just think that today, I guess everybody throws all that to the thing, throws it all out. You just throw it away. And I'm a little nervous right now.
That's okay. That's okay. So just talk to me about Christian nations that have consistently turned the other cheek and survived, because that's certainly not true of the United States. It's not true of England. It's not true of France or Germany. In fact, I can't think of any Christian nations that have used turn the other cheek as their foreign policy. So you can always seize on this or that text from this or that religion, but the idea of turn the other cheek as the basis for foreign policy, it's never been used by any nation that's been able to survive.
Well, yeah, but I was really more talking about on an individual level.
Right.
You know, not a macro level.
Right. It's not a basis for foreign policy. It is a basis for a lot of human interactions where it's often better to turn the other cheek.
Right. I think a lot of times, like, okay, let's say I'm upset about some policy. I don't want to go into any examples. Say I'm upset about a policy the U.S. government has. I'm not going to go out there and bomb a Capitol building or whatever. I'm not going to do anything like that. It's just, you know, even though I may disagree with what they say, you know.
Right. So turn the other cheek is often an excellent interpersonal strategy, but it's a really lousy strategy for a foreign policy for a nation state that wants to survive. So there are a lot of moral ideals that are great for people to employ in their personal life, but they are a terrible basis for foreign policy.
Well, right. Yeah, you're probably right. But, you know, like I said, I'm just more or less talking about individual choices, you know, and if more people just side on caution, I think we wouldn't have so many problems. But, you know, obviously, you know, you know, everybody wants to get in on it and they want to take more territory and all that, you know. So I don't know. I don't know what to say. I mean, I think there are boundaries that we have to live by, even in the United States. You know, you have boundaries, and what are?
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about Lebanon. So you served in the U.S. Armed Forces in the 1980s. Ronald Reagan sent Marines to Lebanon as a peacekeeping force, but after 240 of them were blown up, the U.S. left because it saw the retreat, and just removing oneself from a dangerous situation was the better part of valor. So sometimes the right thing to do is to simply remove yourself and to retreat.
Yeah, you're right. Because when I was in the 82nd, that happened in October of '83, if I remember correctly, and we were put on alert, and we thought we were all going to Lebanon, and we were listening to the radio because we didn't know anything, and they locked us down, and so we were listening to one of the local radio stations, and they had the press, public affairs officer, and he said that the 82nd was activated. It's just a common, or whatever. It was just a, customary thing they would do in a situation like this would be, notify the soldiers. And so we thought we were all going to Lebanon. Then when we get down to the airport, it was called Pope Air Force Base. When we got down there, they started telling us we're going to go to this place called Grenada. And they had this thing planned for quite a while. So it was just a routine thing. Yeah, so we all anticipated going over to Lebanon to help clean up the mess or provide more security. But when we get involved directly in these conflicts, we're gonna get slapped, and it's unfortunate, but it has happened. I mean, we go to places like Haiti, Somalia, Afghanistan, and we just get slapped, and I don't understand it. I don't understand that foreign policy.
Now, how do you think about importing hundreds of thousands of Haitians to the United States and giving them protective status? How do you think that's working out for towns in Ohio like Springfield?
I don't think it's happening. I don't think it's doing too well. From what I understand, it's draining a lot of resources, causing a lot of problems. But I think those problems usually work their way out over time. But I think after a while things get absorbed and all this. And I hate, but I don't know. I don't know. At the beginning, it's always tough and it's hard to stomach and allow these people to have all these goodies, and while the rest of the people are starving and having a hard time, and then they got to give, they find out that I guess these people get $1,700 a month on food stamps or something like that, and a lot of people don't get any of that. They got to work, and so it's a hard pill to swallow. So yeah, I think it's causing a lot of problems, and I don't think it's actually fair. I mean, like I say, if they want to come over here and maybe have some, but I guess in the old days, if you came over, you were sponsored by somebody, either by a church or a group or a rich person. They come over and they would make sure that you were cared for. You weren't going to be a burden to the system. But when you come over and you're a burden to the system, how long are they going to stay on the system now? That's the problem.
Yeah, Donald Trump asked a good question. Why do we have to take people from these shithole countries? And I agree with him. If we're going to have immigrants, let's take them from countries like Norway.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we want people that can contribute. We don't need any more lettuce pickers. I hate to say that, but
yeah,
I don't. But we need people. We need scientists. We need engineers and stuff like that, and people that can function at this high level.
Yeah.
But at any rate, it's unfortunate that they bring these people here, and where I live in Sandusky, I don't really see too much of it.
And what do you think about the idea that Trump derangement syndrome is a luxury belief for people who don't have migrants camping on their front yard and threatening them?
I don't recall. Could you explain that a little bit better? I don't understand.
Yeah. So if you have migrants camping on your front yard and interrupting and threatening you, then you want a leader who's going to deport them and control them. And so being anti-Trump is is a luxurious belief if you are not living in those dire circumstances where migrants have come to diminish your quality of life and just increase trouble in your neighborhood.
Right, I agree with you there. I think Trump's policy hopefully will work out. But you know, when he was president, I don't think that I don't know how many people were removed or whatever back when he was in the office the first time. So I don't know if he did that good of a job.
And will you be voting for Trump this time around or for Kamala Harris?
I would, well, I guess I want to vote for Trump. Lesser of two evils, I guess. But being pro-life, I would definitely have to vote for Trump.
Okay. Okay. Anything else that you want to say before I move on?
No, thank you for having me, and I'll try again some other time. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Thanks, Joe. Take care, man. Okay.
I've seen, social media and even just friends that you talk to about stories like this who have been sort of semi-mocking Israel for the, given the number of explosions we're talking about, the relative few fatalities in terms of members of Hezbollah that they've caused. But it struck me that maybe there's arguably more beneficial to Israel, an information gathering element to this. They now know that anyone that had a pager or a walkie-talkie that has exploded, they know they're a member of Hezbollah. And I'm assuming Israel have got spies all over the place in Lebanon as well that will have, almost literally been able to sort of write down, him, etc.
Well, there's certainly, someone compared it to, elections where people have to stick their finger in ink to show that they voted. If you're wandering around with a bandage on your hand or a hole in your thigh where your page has gone off, you're pretty much identifiable. But I think, there's a much more serious point here actually, and I think your friends there are missing a trick there when you see how this is done. As someone said, and it's kind of obvious and it's a bit crude to say it, if you can have your balls blown off by a pager that Israel has given your organization, that is a very intimate psychological blow to you and to your comrades. And that's what we're talking about. Obviously not everyone had their balls blown off, but they had their hands blown off. This is a very intimate attack. It's a very intimate psychological attack.
Okay, let's bring Sam from Haifa back to the show. Sam, what's going on, man?
Hey there, Luke. Long time no hear. How you doing?
Good, man. What's new?
I wanted to chime in on what's happening and, throw my 2 cents in. And actually kind of focus on a tangent that's related, but is not being talked about. Because it's obvious to a lot of people that are focusing on the macro, geopolitical circumstances that we're finding ourselves in, and people aren't putting the pieces of the puzzle together. The chess game that's being played here, the larger, grander agenda of nuclear powers, America a fading superpower. You got to take notice of the fact that the Americans were like pressuring us and sort of like putting us under pressure to do something. It was Lloyd Austin that redeployed one of the carrier groups out of the region, and then he's the defense secretary. So he was telling our defense secretary and our government, you better do something now or else the window of opportunity will close. All right. So there's the explanation for the exploding pagers and walkie-talkies. And also it's because we're coming upon winter and it's not preferable for ground war, for maneuvers. And there's a lot of reasons that this is happening. The Americans, if you haven't noticed, you live there in California, everything is going south economically, and they're engineers, the manipulators of the perception management, mainstream media, corporate media, the engineers of just like the inventors of the false religion of Christianity. The liars are trying to convince the world and the American people that the economy is doing well prior to the elections. And it's for the American people on the ground living there with Main Street economics looking more and more like a horror show, like it's the apocalypse. Nobody's buying it. And the markets are like, it's called a crack up boom. They're like rising and rising. And around the world, there's a sense that impending doom financially. The Federal Reserve raised rates by 50 basis points. And it's like the kiss of death.
It recently cut rates by 50 basis points. But
did I say raise? Oh, no, they cut rates. Yeah, they cut rates. Sorry, I misspoke. They cut rates. So everybody's, all the analysts are saying that this is a desperate move. So they cut rates. And look at what's happening in the Persian Gulf, in our part of the world, in the Middle East, where I live. Things are escalating, and they're not escalating organically. It was given a green light. All right? Why? Because they're timing all of this. Okay?
Who's they?
The moneyed powers, the powers that be, the people that control the world reserve currency. It's the English establishment, the British, the Anglo-American Empire, the British, the Americans, the Satanist Nazis in Europe, the cabal, okay, World Economic Forum, all those bastards, Vatican, all that crap is actually coming down. It's prophetic. It's in the book of Daniel.
So how come you're able to see through the bullshit and most people can't?
It's because I obsess over this. This is my life's passion right now, to understand that we are in the end times, and Jewish eschatology is actually panning out and coming to fruition, and it's actually manifesting. And at the end of it, we have messianic revelation. And so this is what you have to look forward to. America and the coalition in the Persian Gulf, in the CENTCOM, Central Command, they are playing footsie. They're playing not footsie. They're playing like they're hesitant. It's the same game. It's perception management. They don't want to be seen as the aggressors, but they will, at the end of the day, strike Iran along with Israel, along with us. And what I have termed it is the Straits of Hormuz gambit. I'm calling it the the blockade of the Straits of Hormuz, gambit, deception, smokescreen. Okay, this is a card that the Western world, the Western powers will play for their great reset. And I've said this for the longest with other people I've spoken to online, with the author of Caesar's Messiah, Joseph Atwell, over 2 years ago. Frequently, we got into it, and it's panning out. And it's also prophetic according to Jewish prophecies. It's written in our prophets and in our, sages.
Okay, so is there anything that could happen that would convince you you're wrong, or will you interpret whatever happens in a way that confirms you're right? Okay, if there was nuclear war, then you'd realize you were wrong?
Yes, but it won't happen.
Anything else that could happen? Anything else that could happen that would convince you that you were wrong?
No, it's too far along.
So no matter what happens outside of nuclear war, you're going to be convinced that you're right?
Yes.
Okay, so your beliefs are essentially immune from reality.
No, it's 100% Jewish eschatology and prophecy.
And how do you know that your interpretation of Jewish eschatology is correct?
Because I'm following the Kabbalistic rabbis, and I'm following our sages. It's written in our books that Iran, Persia, would be the impetus, the ignition, the catalyst for ending the world as we know it. All right.
And is there only one way to understand these eschatological prophecies, or are there a whole bunch of contradictory ways of understanding
Anyone is free to interpret it however they like, but I see the factors all coming together, all of the different parts of the puzzle coming together. As it's written in the book of Daniel, the moneyed powers, the powers that be, Meshech Tuval, the Satanists, this cultist cabal of world power, elites controlling the world. There's no doubt that it exists. Their time is at an end. All right, they will lose their control over the money, over the power, and this is when the world goes into total disarray. Hello, are you there?
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to move on, Sam. These are familiar things that you've argued before. But
we're on the edge. Once Iran starts its mess and blocks the Straits of Hormuz, it's the smokescreen for global financial collapse. Bottom.
Okay, thanks, Sam. I'm going to move on here. Let me get a little bit more commentary.
Week this week in the Middle East. Joining us now to discuss that escalating conflict and the extraordinary pages / blowing up phones, etc. Attacks against Hezbollah. Former British commander, great friend of the show, Richard Kemp, Colonel Richard Kemp. Richard, great to see you. You're in Washington, I gather. Just tell us, really fascinated by the military side, the complexity of the pager attack. So these pages blew up with Hezbollah. They were pages that only went to Hezbollah operatives. They blew up, killed several, injured many more. Tell us about the military side of this attack from your point of view, Richard.
Yeah, good to be with you. This is a very devastating attack against Hezbollah, and it's probably about the most carefully focused attack you could ever launch against a terrorist organization, because it's targeted on individuals who are members of the Hezbollah terrorist organization. It's incredibly sophisticated work presumably by Israeli intelligence, although they haven't acknowledged that it was them that did it. I think most people assume that it was. And it's not only does it do real damage to Hezbollah, and I'm talking about destroying their communication system to all intents and purposes with both pagers and also walkie-talkies, but also killing probably quite a large number of Hamas operatives, including senior ones, and severely wounding many, many others. Very damaging to Hezbollah, and also deeply humiliating to Hezbollah. Across the Middle East, there has been Hezbollah has been ridiculed by on social media and in some mainstream media for failing to have the level of security needed to be weak enough to allow Israel to carry out this operation. So a very, very serious attack against Hezbollah, which could have strategic consequences.
James.
Well, along with that, we've now seen the walkie-talkies exploded, and now they've hit Hamas operatives meeting to talk about what to do. This would seem to be there be other benefits as well, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Number one, I imagine that this would be psychologically hugely crippling to Hezbollah and their operatives, who would now be just, completely paranoid because they don't know where the next thing that's going to, literally explode on them is. But also, it seems they'd have a huge intelligence trove now on, who is in Hezbollah, who these people are, everybody who went to the hospital. They've got information now on everybody who's now linked at the level where they'd be getting one of these pagers. Could you speak to that a bit?
Yeah, when there's such a massive security breach as this was, any organization that suffers from it immediately wants to carry out investigations to find out who was responsible. Because, of course, if they're still active within the organization, which they probably are, then they could do even more damage. And so it becomes critical. And that in itself is a crippling operation where everyone's under suspicion, or many people are under suspicion. And they don't, as you just said, they don't know which way to turn in terms, can they use their mobile phones? Can they use their electric toothbrushes? Can they use computers? Is there a risk in all of this stuff? So it's very, very psychologically damaging to them.
Rita.
I'm interested in your response to the commentary we've heard since this attack took place. A lot of politicians even, we've got Green senators here, including Marine Faruqi, saying this was just an unacceptable act. A lot of people are calling it an act of terror, essentially. Is that how you see it? I would have thought targeting Hezbollah operatives was as far away from terrorism as you could possibly get. They weren't targeting just regular folk, but there is a lot of commentary that this was an indiscriminate attack and innocent people were caught up in it.
Yeah, because everything Israel does is wrong.
Glad you cleared that one up for us, Richard. Now I understand what I've been misreading. Thank you, Richard. Excellent. Good.
That's what Senator Marine Faruqi meant.
That's what
everything Israel does.
You nailed it there, Richard. Carry on. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, Israel carries out an attack in Gaza to kill terrorists hiding behind human shields. And tragically, uninvolved civilians sometimes die, despite the precautions that the IDF take. And then, so that's wrong, because it risks civilian death. Then, when Israel carries out a really pinpoint attack like this, okay, there may have been one or two people killed who shouldn't have been killed in this attack, but that happens in war, and it's not terrorism. This is not a terrorist attack. It's the probably most precise anti-terrorist attack you could carry out. And Israel is perfectly entitled to target those people who have been firing.
So why is the left so protective of Islamic terror groups? And I think the simplest answer is that the left and Islamic terror groups like Hezbollah and Hamas, they all hate the United States of America, and they hate the Jewish state of Israel. And so this mutual hatred is what binds them together.
Attack from Israel, although it hasn't claimed responsibility. I think everyone knows that Israel's behind it. On essentially Hezbollah's pager network, thousands of pages exploded the other day, believed to have been targeting mostly Hezbollah militants and members and higher ups. Tom, what have you made of this?
No, it was an incredible, audacious move, as you say. I mean, there was the blowing up of the pages as well as the walkie-talkies as well, which, as a combination of both, I think it's more than 40 people have been killed, about 2,500 people injured. And it was an attack that really no one saw coming. I mean, this is as a consequence of the fact that in recent months, Hezbollah have been telling their members, their combatants, their soldiers to stop using mobile phones because...
So there are many times in war where it's a better strategy to maim your enemy than to kill your enemy. Because if you maim your enemy, you will require your enemy to expend considerable resources to try to heal the maimed member of his team. So Israel could have conceivably, I would expect, put even more explosive in these pages. Maybe it was part of Israel's strategy to overwhelmingly maim rather than kill.
They realised that the Israeli intelligence services were on top of them as a consequence of that. But somehow, and people are still trying to put together the pieces as to how these pages ended up in their hands, at what point they were intercepted, at what point they were loaded with these explosives and so on. They've basically pulled off the most remarkable kind of precision attack on terrorists I think we've ever seen. And it's already having all kinds of consequences. I mean, as things might well move on by the time people watch and listen to this, as Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, was giving a televised address today, we're recording on the Thursday, addressing this whole issue and talking about how there are going to be consequences and retaliation and so on. Israel have also begun airstrikes in southern Lebanon and Hezbollah targets as well. All of this does happen in the context of Israel returning the displaced 60,000 people from the north of Israel who've been kind of under fire from Hezbollah since the conflict started. They've made returning those people an actually explicit war aims. That's also the kind of context in which we're talking about this. So things may well continue to develop and in quite significant fashion. But it was interesting in the immediate wake of what happened, the kind of speed with which I suppose you could call it the kind of Tears for Hezbollah crowd came out, and we're talking about this explicitly as a war crime, as another example of horrendous Israeli militarism. And it's obviously worth saying that there were some innocents who died as a consequence of this. There's one little girl in particular, and any civilian death in the midst of conflict is horrendous, and no one should be relaxed about that. But at the same time, by any feasible standard of warfare, it doesn't get much more precision targeted than this. And yet what seems to happen is, if there's any kind of crossfire whatsoever, that now seems to be the bar where Israel is concerned. I mean, literally holding to a standard that no one has ever managed to maintain in the midst of war. And so I just think if this is a war crime, if this is something which is reason to show that not just Israeli aggression, but Israel itself is illegitimate, it shows you that they really can do nothing right, really, in the context of not just this conflict, but in general.
And even just the context, the fact that, Hezbollah has been attacking Israel since the 7th of October, that is often left out of this discussion. It is only the Israeli retaliations that make the news. In this instance, for good reason, because it was so audacious. I mean, the New York Times has suggested that they didn't even intercept the pages, but they invented a whole network and supply chain of pages to essentially sell to them, via all these shell companies around the world. I mean, it is extraordinary.
Yeah, I mean, it is remarkable. And, more information is going to be revealed over the coming days. And I think, it's really been fascinating for a lot of people because it is, a new development that we may never have seen, in the past.
So I was just thinking of pathetic trains of thought that I notice in myself at times and in other people. And so one pathetic strand that I see quite often is that other groups, other people just have it easy. When in reality, life's a struggle for everyone. The idea that other groups don't have to work for their success, so there's such a thing as white privilege, and all white people, they just get a glide path to prosperity, right? A particularly stupid way of thinking. The knee-jerk assumption that people with more power than me are bad. Another knee-jerk assumption that I find quite annoying is there's nothing I can do to improve the quality of my life because I am a victim. the assumption that this other group has no importance, that they're barely human. I remember when I was growing up in Australia, I noticed this widespread attitude among other Australians that non-Australians don't matter. Another annoying common strand of thought is the system is rigged against people like me, and because I'm a victim or because I'm special, the rules don't apply to me. So just noting down the most annoying strains of thought that I noticed in real life. New Yorker has an interesting essay. Are your morals too good to be true? Scientists have shattered our self-image as principled beings motivated by moral truths. Really, when exactly was that our self-image, that we are primarily principled beings motivated by moral truths? Some wonder whether our ideals can survive the blow to our vanity. Right? I don't even understand this perspective. Right? I would always think that human beings have selfish tendencies overwhelmingly, but also some altruistic tendencies, because it's in your long run best interest to display some altruism at times. That ideals without regard to reality are just absurd, that they're just a form of mental masturbation. But let's hear a few excerpts from this New Yorker essay.
Annals of Inquiry, published in The New Yorker with the headline, "Are Your Morals Too Good to Be True?" Written by Manveer Singh and read by an automated voice. I spent the summer of 2011 as an undergraduate researcher at the Rocky Mountain Biological Laboratory in Colorado. My job was to collect burying beetles, necrophagous critters with wing cases the colors of Halloween, using traps made out of coffee cans and chicken flesh. Behavioral biologists are fascinated by burying beetles because of their biparental model of care. Males and females prepare meaty balls from carcasses and then cooperatively raise larvae on them. I was a matchmaker charged with setting up pairs of beetles and watching them co-parent. That summer was a dream. I lived in a...
So this sounds a lot to me like the Madonna whore complex that I have been vulnerable to at times, putting my woman or women in general on a pedestal, and then at other times just wanting to degrade them and hate them and fear them, and just rocking back and forth between extremes. So way too much of my life has been spent either idealizing people or degrading people. On the other hand, if you have normal human relationships, all right, when I have been integrated with my family, with my friends, with my community, I'm much less vulnerable to the ups and downs of these extremes of opinion. So I think the author here, Manveer Singh, is describing his own absurd extreme swings of opinion on morality because he had so much time to think about these topics, right? If you have a meaning crisis in your life, it's normally because you don't have normal levels of human connection. If you're married, if you have kids, you should not be having a meaning crisis in your life. If you have family and friends who you care about, right, that should provide you all the meaning that you need. But if you live in an abstract world where you are largely cut off from other people, then you're highly susceptible to what's going on in this essay.
Community of more than 100 scientists, students, and staff. The research station, based at the site of a deserted mining town, was a magnet for weirdos and plant lovers, naturalists and marmot chasers, flower people and climate watchers. It consisted of dozens of cabins, some Lincoln log style and more than a century old, others retrofitted.
So most people overestimate their driving ability, all right? We consistently overestimate many of our abilities. And yeah, I think we probably tend to overestimate how moral we are. Now, some people will claim to make science the basis for their worldview, but that doesn't really make sense. It doesn't constitute a worldview. Science is just a valuable tool for ascertaining certain types of truth. Whatever the basis of your hero system, you will, in all likelihood, get it from the people around you, such as your family and your community, and you will live as though your hero system is 100% objectively true, right? Whether you're religious or secular, whether you're an atheist or a believing Christian, right? You have a particular way of looking at the world that describes what is heroic, what is valuable, and what is evil.
Into modern laboratories, encircled by spruce and aspen forests, montane meadows, and monumental peaks. I was more accustomed to sidewalks than to summits, but now I saw elk and black bears and woke up one night to a porcupine gnawing on my cabin. For the first time in my life, I found love, or something close to it. In spare moments, I retired to my room where I drew.
Okay, that is the key phrase. For the first time in my life, I found love. So this is somebody who has lived largely disconnected from others, right? For the first time in his life, he finds love when he's in his early 20s. I mean, how sad is that, and how unusual is that? And it's only from that kind of twisted, unusual psychology and background do you get these extreme swings of perspective on morality.
Drew and wrote in my journal, on the weekends, we scaled the Rockies. A part of me wanted that summer to be my forever. I envisioned a career as a collector of coleopterans, sneaking off to the mountains to cavort and observe. Another part of me worried that I was being frivolous. Back in college, my classmates had high-minded ambitions like fighting climate change, becoming human rights lawyers, and starting microfinance firms to alleviate.
What your classmates overwhelmingly had that you did not have was prior experience with love, right? Most people grow up with some sense of being loved and having the opportunity to love others, right? You have to be quite the exception to not encounter love until your early 20s.
Alleviate poverty. To spend time with books and beetles in wildflower country seemed the pinnacle of self-indulgence. Adding to the internal tension was something I'd observed among my beetles, the specter of evolved selfishness. What looked like cooperation was, I discovered.
So I remember when I had my first sexual relationship, and at times I was just amazed at the kindness and the goodness of my girlfriend. And she would essentially say to me, you shouldn't put me on a pedestal. I have my own selfish reasons for being kind to you, right? She wanted to attach herself to me for life.
Laced with sexual conflict. The female beetles, when they had a size advantage, ejected their male partners. The males evidently stuck around less to help than to ensure future mating opportunities.
So when we're doing horrible things, we're often trying to meet our needs the best way we know how. When we're doing noble things, they're often shot-filled with selfishness. So to not recognize the complicated nature of reality and the complicated nature of what drives us is to be incredibly naive and to demonstrate that you are largely out of touch with what is the normal human condition.
Where I first saw biparental collaboration was instead a complicated waltz of organisms seeking to perpetuate their own interests.
It is normal, natural, and healthy to spend probably 95% of your time and effort to perpetuate your own interest, right? But if you operate at 99%, other people will consider you selfish and they will shun you, and that will be strongly against your interests, all right? If you're so miserly that other people don't want to hang out with you, don't want to join forces with you, that's strongly against your interests. On the other hand, if you go around at only 80% of the time you are advancing your own interests, that may well be too low, and you may be insufficiently living up to your own obligations to yourself. So something like 95% devoted to your own interests seems like the sweet spot. I tell my sponsees, if you can live a life that's only 90% selfish, right, you're a winner. Don't aim for something lower than that.
One of them, another gene machine bent on favoring itself? I had to that point considered myself a mostly decent person, moved by empathy and committed to self-expression. Was all this actually vanity and delusion, selfishness masquerading as morality? The prospect was unsettling, so I hid away in a one-room library that smelled faintly of old textbooks and the alcohol used to preserve animal specimens, and there I started to work out a response. We're evolved organisms, I figured, but we're also an intelligent cultural species capable of living by ideals that transcend our egoistic origins. What emerged from my musings was a personal ideology, at the core of which was an appreciation of creation, including artistic and scientific work. Even an awkward scribble, I supposed, expresses an incomprehensibly.
So do you think if he had a little bit more love in his life, he would be so obsessed about these abstract themes? I suspect not.
Epic causal history, which includes a maker, the maker's parents, the quality of the air in the room, and so on, until it expands to encompass the entire universe. Goodness could be reclaimed, I thought. I would draw and write and do science, but as acts of memorialization, the duties of an apostle of being.
So much of this just sounds like gobbledygook. And I respect his openness about how deluded he was. All right, this is just such a vain perspective on life. And the author apparently found reality highly unsettling because reality disturbed his delusions. And that's a good thing, right? There's nothing about committed to self-expression that correlates with ethics. It's just part of the liberal hero system that subscribes to the dictum, follow your bliss, right? His celebrationism, his worldview makes no sense. It's not going to enthuse many people. And how exactly does a scribble encompass an entire universe? Right? The duties of an apostle of being, that's just gobbledygook. These are the type of bizarre thoughts that you get from somebody who overwhelmingly leads an isolated and unloved life.
I called the ideology celebrationism, and early in 2012, I started to codify it in a manic, sprawling novel of that name. I had grown up a good Sikh boy. I wore a turban, didn't cut my hair, didn't drink or smoke. The idea of a God that acted in the world had long seemed implausible, yet it wasn't until I started studying evolution in earnest that the strictures of religion and of every...
How is belief in God, the God of the Bible, more implausible than celebrationism and his own philosophy? I don't see that.
Everyday conventions began to feel brittle. By my junior year of college, I thought of myself as...
Yeah, everyday conventions seem brittle. Right? This is the type of thinking you get when you're disconnected, when you're unwilling to follow everyday conventions. Right? When you're willing to follow everyday conventions, you are much more likely to develop love in your life. Right? If you just have contempt for everyday conventions, you are going to isolate and get weird.
As a materialist, open-minded but skeptical of anything that smacked of the supernatural. Celebrationism came soon after. It expanded from an ethical roadmap into a life philosophy spanning aesthetics, spirituality, and purpose. By the end of my senior year, I was painting my fingernails, drawing swirling Mendi tattoos on my limbs, and regularly walking without shoes, including during my college graduation. "Why, Manveer?" my mother asked quietly, and I launched into a riff about the illusory nature of normativity and about how I was merely a fancy organism produced by cosmic megaforces.
So even when he had these beliefs, all right, he would have regarded them as absolutely true, because we all have a hero system that we can't help but live as though it's 100% objectively true. Even those who deny that there are any objective truths will react with outrage if someone deliberately steps on their foot, or someone deliberately punches them in the face, or someone deliberately steals money from them. Right? Everybody in their core will feel that this is a moral outrage, no matter how philosophically you are devoted to moral relativism. Right? We all walk around with a hero system that provides a way for us to feel significant. And the movement towards this hero system requires no bigger leap of faith than belief in God, in Judaism, Christianity.
After college, I spent a year in Copenhagen, where I studied social insects by day and worked on celebrationism the rest of the time. Reassured of the virtue of intellectual and artistic work,
Do you think that if he had friends, he would be so devoted to developing his ideas about celebrationism?
soon concluded that fictional wizards provided the best model for a life.
He concluded that fictional wizards provide the best model for life. And I have known loneliness, and I have known isolation, and I have known my own flights of weird thinking. But no matter how low I have sunk, I have only very rarely enjoyed the science fiction fantasy approach to life. I did enjoy some of the science fiction novels of C.S. Lewis when I was a kid, and I did read The Hobbit and J.R. Tolkien when I was a teenager. But I only recently watched the first Star Wars movie that came out in 1977. Not my thing.
As I wrote to my friend Corey, They're wise, eccentric, colorful, so knowledgeable about some of the most esoteric subjects, lone wolves in a sense, but all of their life experience constantly comes together in an exalting way every time they do something. When, the following year, I started a PhD in human evolutionary biology at Harvard, I saw the decision as in service of my celebrationist creed. I could devote myself to meditating on the opportune swerves that produced us. I was mistaken. Celebrationism died soon afterward. Just as
So I've had sponsees who wish that they could spend hours a day in meditation, right, rather than living up to their obligations, such as to take care of a wife and family. On Friday morning, I started watching and listening to the following video, to which I had an extremely strong negative reaction. And I think that I had this strongly negative reaction because the guest here, Adam Lane Smith, a psychotherapist who specializes in attachment, reminds me so much of my father and of myself at times. I really don't want to operate at this level of arrogance.
A human impact is the purpose of a man's life, because someday you will die, you will be dust, your money will be frittered away and taken through taxes and all kinds.
All right, I think that's great. So he says so many things that I think are great, but it's his overall manner that drives me insane.
Kinds of things. Your property will be divvied up. Everything you've cared for in your life will be taken away.
This guy speaks with the same self-assurance that my father spoke with and that I have often spoke with, even when I didn't know what the heck I was talking about.
The only thing that endures is the future generations who are fundamentally altered because of your existence on this planet. That is the purpose of a man's life. That is why so many men want to kill themselves now, is because they find no purpose and no ability to create human impact.
I think that's great, right? But I have a really negative reaction overall to this bloke.
I picked up recently. Most couples therapy is useless. Not because the therapy is wrong, but because most...
Okay, this is what drives me crazy about Adam Lane Smith, that he regards competing methods, generally speaking, as useless and certainly inferior compared to his own. And you never get the sense that he's a bloke who says, I don't know, or maybe you'd be better off with a different approach. He is so dedicated to selling his information products and his coaching programs and developing an online following that it's turned him into an antisocial guru.
Most couples don't go to therapy together until one of them is absolutely not wanting to work on the relationship anymore. They're using therapy as an excuse to air their frustration.
So I'm sure he's right some of the time, but is he right that this is correct most of the time? I think he's dramatically overstating his points to try to make himself seem more important. And I find that annoying because it reminds me of myself and my father.
One last time.
So many times I've had couples come in, and that's exactly what it is one is all in for it and is convinced I'm going to fix their partner and tell them that they've been right all along. And the other partner comes in dreading it because their partner's the one who set it up. And they say, what sort of buzzsaw am I walking into? And it is a miserable experience for all three people involved, unless I can turn them around and convince the other partner that I'm there to help.
Wow. So unless it's Adam Lane Smith, right, the couples therapy is just headed for uselessness and collapse.
Help them, in which case the first partner is convinced that I have somehow pulled a switcheroo, and they are now going to get betrayed by their coach now, who's working with them. It's an ugly process. It is really ugly. The only time couples therapy really works is when they are coming in because they both want to make it work, but they don't have the skills and they have no idea what to do. If they both want to make it work, it's an amazing experience.
Yeah. So what he's arguing for here is if couples therapy is conducted by me and people like me, then it can be great.
If one of them doesn't want to work and doesn't have the guts to say it, it's a horrible experience for both people.
Why is it so rare for couples to go to couples therapy before the stage that one of them is basically ready to call it quits and needs an arbiter between the two of them?
because most people do not have the skills they need to speak to their partner proactively and productively about the problems. So they just pretend there aren't problems, or they throw anger and excuses at each other over and over and over again. One will try, the other withdraws, then they switch, and the other one tries again, and the other one withdraws. And they only vent to the people around them. They don't actually go out and get proactive solutions from the people around them. And their family systems are usually broken, so they've never.
So I was just thinking about applying the Gurometer to people like Adam Lane Smith and myself and my father. So this is the Gurometer from the hosts of Decoding the Gurus, Matt Brown and Chris Kavanaugh. And they say our specific focus tends to be the subset of gurus who make liberal use of pseudo-profound bullshit, referring to speech that is persuasive and creates the appearance of profundity with little regard for truth or reference to relevant expertise. So I tried to minimize how often I do this. The recurring characteristics identified collectively trend towards negative traits. So here's the first characteristic of gurus: galaxy brainness, an ironic descriptor of someone who presents ideas that appear to be too profound for an average mind to comprehend, but are in truth reasonably trivial, if not nonsensical. So I'd give my father probably a 3 or a 4 on a 1 to 5 here. And I can't accurately see myself, but I hope I don't do this too much. Gurus present themselves as fonts of wisdom. It is an all-encompassing kind of knowledge that tends to span multiple disciplines and topics. And this is the vibe that I'm getting from Adam Lane Smith. And if you look at the topics that my father published books on, they're just so vast and broad that I think this descriptor is relevant. If you look at the topics that I do live streams on, then I sure hope this description is not relevant for me. So their arguments often link together disparate concepts such as quantum mechanics, logic, and the nature of consciousness. The guru will often present themselves as a polymath who can offer novel insights with reference to many fields. So I'll say this in favor of Adam Lane Smith. He does seem, from the few hours that I've listened to him, to confine his pronouncements to attachment theory. They'll often allude to their own accomplishments, exaggerate them to a shameless degree. I remember my father wanted to be known as Dr. Ford, even though it's not normal to refer to someone who's not a medical doctor as doctor. They'll consistently offer hot takes on technical topics and with a wave of their hand, dismiss the perspectives of genuine experts. Yeah, I'm getting this from Adam Lane Smith. I remember that from my father, and I've often demonstrated that trait myself. This is a confidence trick that relies on the recipient being convinced of their unique intellectual power. So through much of my life, I would make all sorts of very confident pronouncements on topics I did not know much about. I hope I do that less now. Various performative flourishes can assist in this deception, such as unnecessary references to high or specialist literature, the use of jargon and technical terms. My father didn't do that. I don't do that. On closer inspection, these references can be recognized to be superfluous and tangential to the argument presented. The recipient is not expected to dig too deeply or to fully understand the references made. They're probably most effective when the recipient does not understand them at all. They are merely illusions intended to signal a deeper level of knowledge.
Seen a healthy relationship. They think this is as good as it gets. They only seek professional help when one of them panics because the other one has made a change. And I will also say this: women change for relationships, typically. Men only will change for circumstances, which is reality. Women will usually be done with a relationship a year or more before they're actually ready to get divorced. Men have no idea that this is coming. Men get blindsided and they say, wait, I'm finally willing to give it a try. Let's try couples therapy. And she's been done for a year. So this is a very common problem right there.
Do you think that that explains part of the reason that most divorces are initiated by women?
Absolutely.
So I have sympathy for what he's saying, but I think it is dramatically overstated.
Absolutely. At 100%. Because most women have spent 5, 10, 20 years changing for the relationship, hoping that her husband will secretly somehow change for the relationship too. Men only change when they observe a problem and then when they believe that there is a solvable.
So do you think that's true most of the time? That women have been changing for 10, 20 years and men were just stubbornly resistant to change? I suspect this is just a vast overstatement, and it's said with so much authority and assurance that's why I'm getting such a strong secular guru vibe from this guy.
problem there that they can actually work on. It takes both of those things for a man to actually work on something. Most men will only change enough to try to stop the discomfort that they're experiencing and try to go backward.
Yeah, it's I have a number of friends that have either been through couples counseling or are going to couples counseling at the moment, and I would say that
Does this ring true to you, or does it sound like dramatic overstatement to try to increase his own power and credibility and following?
Archetype is, as you've described, that it really is, if this counseling was to make the relationship better, it is a severe.
So I don't know if I'm just projecting my own perhaps unresolved baggage with my past self or with my father, but even though I'm so sympathetic to the substance of most of what Adam Lane Smith has to say that I have heard, I have such a strong emotional reaction against the way he presents himself.
Uphill battle, which I imagine from a therapist's perspective makes couples counseling not exactly fun.
So I went through school, graduate program, 6 years for a master's degree, and then an additional 3 years of apprenticeship, of hard apprenticeship under clinicians. So it's 9-year process.
Why on earth would he take 6 years to get a master's degree? Right, that could normally be accomplished in 2 years or less.
Process to become a marriage and family therapist. 9 years of training of them telling us you will get burned out on this job. Couples therapy is hard. Couples don't actually usually get better. Very few of them do. It's hard work, and you have to completely detach from their outcomes, because otherwise you will drive yourself crazy watching one couple after another tear themselves.
So I tell that to my sponsees that I am not invested in their recovery. I would love to see them recover, but I'm not invested. It's not going to affect my happiness level.
Apart, there's nothing you can do to help them. This is the messaging they gave us, and it was very true. You come in, you do the best that you can, and you guide them forward. And usually the biggest piece that I would do is get them to a point where they could say, what got you together in the first place? Where do you have any commonalities? And where is there even a sliver of hope that both of you could work together on this? If there's even a tiny shred of hope, we can make this work. Really briefly, one time I had a couple come in to my coaching practice. They both had very, very bad attachment, very bad attachment. Neither one of them knew it. One of them was having an affair. The other one wanted the relationship to work. The one who was having an affair wasn't sure if they wanted it to work or not. I educated them on attachment. First session, educated fully on attachment. Second session, got them working on bonding together and doing what couples are supposed to do. Third session, taught them communication skills and conflict resolution. By the fourth session, when they walked in, both of them were happier in their relationship than they had ever been, even as newlyweds, even as well, they were dating. The person who was cheating said, absolutely not. I'm going to do this marriage. It's amazing. They had healed their attachment together, and they were now.
Yeah. Do you seriously believe that this couple healed their attachment issues in 3 sessions? All right. He is seizing on some stray remarks that this couple has made and some breakthroughs that they made. It just seems like he's exaggerating his own skills.
Growing closer to their friends and their family at the same time. It only took 3 sessions of doing the deep work because both of them were committed to it. If a couple wants to make it work, even extreme circumstances can work, but you must both want to make it work.
How does a pair of people who have got ingrained responses, habituated thought patterns, routines built into their communication style, the way they relate to each other, the way that they show up to each other, how can it be the case that 3 sessions is all that it takes to deprogram something which, at the very least, we're taught?
You can't. That's the answer.
Thought should take 66 days to break and make a new habit.
It's absolutely true. It's absolutely true. It's curious because here's the piece, is so many people are living with a decision they made when they were 1 year old that said, I am scared. I am hurt. I am sad. I feel vulnerable. People will abandon me or people will betray me. There is something wrong with me or with other people, and I am not ever going to be able to be open again because I will never be this hurt, this scared, this vulnerable ever again for the rest of my life. They don't even remember this decision. But that foundational belief has been set into their brain as an absolute fact of the universe. Gravity pulls things down, water is wet, and love is impossible, and I must live in fear for the rest of my life to stay safe. That foundational belief, once you hear it, and say, well, I have been believing that, but it's probably true. And someone comes in, an attachment expert comes in and says, It is not true. Here's an alternate model for living that is possible. I want you to think about it over the next week and tell me.
And I'm sure that there's truth to what he's saying. It just seems significantly overstated and way too assured.
If it's ruining your life, or if this is something that we could fix. And they'll think about it and it ruins it for them. And then they start seeing the matrix and they say, wow, maybe there is two different ways to live. And maybe I've been living the wrong way. Maybe I'm willing to learn. And then they learn it. Once you've got it intellectually, cool. Once you experience it.
Okay, so I'm reacting to this the same way I reacted to the overdose of Christian evangelism that I grew up with, and all the tales about how, you know, people's lives were changed once they came to accept Jesus as their personal savior. And I remember when my father would socialize with other evangelists, they'd all get together and talk about how many souls they had saved. And so this attitude where other people just become fodder for Christ, or fodder for Torah observance, or fodder for your particular brand of attachment theory, I just have this inherent negative reaction to.
That's where it begins to change, because when you experience the difference, your brain chemistry balances out, right? We've got, I deal
Yeah, he teaches you how to see through the BS.
with the 5 big brain chemicals. There's more than this, but the 5 big ones we look at: vasopressin, oxytocin, GABA, gamma aminobutyric acid, and serotonin. Those 4.
Okay, do you think he really knows what he's talking about here? Or is he just invoking these brain chemicals to try to make himself sound more important?
4 are absolutely crucial to get through your good relationships. If you don't have good relationships, you've got a dopamine button that you can punch like a monkey. This is where people have porn addiction and all kinds of addictions and phone addictions and gambling addictions. It's because their brain chemistry is off from their wounded relationships that they've never been fulfilled. It is like a duck that is terrified of water, so it lives its whole life on land. It's like a duck who will never.
I think he's mainly right here. It's just the over assurance, the over definitive nature of how he's saying things. It just rubs me the wrong way, but perhaps this is just my own unresolved issues with my father.
Never fly because it's terrified of the sky as well. It's a duck who is continuously walking because it thinks water or flying is going to kill it. That's what these people are like. As they experience even a little bit, the overwhelming.
So I think that there are probably genetic issues, that people process things in different ways for genetic issues, reasons. Right? It's not just attachment. I've never heard this man say anything positive about medication. Maybe he does. I've just never heard it. But he doesn't make any money or get any status if you take medication and deal with your issues that way. Right? He only gets money and status if you sign on to his program.
Brain chemistry that floods through them from good relationships is like a duck who finally learns to swim or finally flies and says, this is not just not scary. It is exhilarating. It's everything I was built for. Your brain is built for these things, and the addiction to the good takes over, and it heals you much more rapidly than most people are expecting. It is not about habits. It is about cultivating the right experiences so that your brain takes over for you.
The public school system treats boys like defective girls, then raises girls to act more like boys. Check the seed.
I think there's some truth to that. Again, I just find it off-putting because it's in the context of something that just seems overly self-assured, overly definitive, overly, I've got the answers. But is this just my own unresolved issues with my father? Or do you have similar reactions? So even when this guy, Adam Lane Smith, is saying things that I think are overwhelmingly true, I have a negative reaction.
CDC's medication rates for ADHD in boys and antidepressants in girls. What's going on there?
The American school system is designed to churn people out into factory settings or churn people out into a prison setting or a corporate setting in a cubicle. And
okay, so there's no other school system in the world that is more successful. When you look at American testing results by race, the American school system is about the most successful in the world. So I don't think he knows what he's talking about. Why isn't he giving us examples of how they do it in a much smarter way in South Korea or in Japan or in Nigeria or in Luxembourg? Right? He's unable to give examples of other countries where they do it better. He's just using these pat dismissals of a system that overall is working in a pretty effective way right? Our educational problems are overwhelmingly because of bad students, not because of bad teachers, right? We get some lousy education results overwhelmingly because of bad students, not because of teacher unions.
And it is not designed for young boys who are not designed for corporations, or not designed for cubicles, prisons.
Plenty of young boys go through our school system and thrive. So I have so much sympathy for his point about our school system being somewhat anti-male or not most conducive to male thriving. It just seems overly definitive, overly assured, overstating his point.
And factories. It is simply not going to work that way. So it punishes people who stick out, and it medicates them down. We have the medical system here in America, the medical model.
It medicates them down. So I am sure that there are some children who receive unnecessary medication. At the same time, I'm sure there are many children who don't receive any medication and need medication, right? My life would have been so much vastly improved if in elementary school I'd gotten treated for ADHD. So I was so skeptical that what he's saying here is true.
Of mental health. I work with the response model. If something is off, the person is not responding right, or the situation is not right, there's something happening where we need to change their response, not medicate.
Not medicate. That's insane. There are circumstances, there are individuals, it seems to me, where medication is the number one thing that they need. And then there are other people whose number one thing that they might need is this kind of Adam Lane Smith attachment theory. But his dismissal of the single most studied area of psychiatry, treatment for ADHD, and the overwhelming effectiveness of ADHD medication, right? More than 90% positive results upon taking ADHD medication, makes me skeptical of this man.
Them into oblivion because there's something wrong with their brain.
I haven't met any kids who've been medicated into oblivion. Right? In my life experience, I encounter far more people who need to be medicated than I encounter people who've been medicated into oblivion. Right? I encounter screaming, psychotic, homeless people all the time in Los Angeles. I almost never encounter anyone who has been medicated into oblivion. I'm thinking of this one woman, my own age, who people tried to pair me up with when I came to Los Angeles in 1994. And when she was off her meds, she was just a social menace. She would set fires. She would blow the shofar at 3 a.m. She became a social menace. On her medication, she was an acceptable human being. So I'm absolutely sure there are some people who get medicated into zombie status where that's a mistake. But overwhelmingly, my life experience, right, people who go off their meds improperly are far more of a threat than people who are medicated.
Boys are not defective girls. Boys are boys, and we need to create a system for them.
Why the female set point? Why presume that boys should act like defective girls?
It's the same reason that overseas, when American companies ship their jobs overseas, they usually pull in female workers into their sweatshops because they are quiet, they are more compliant, they just sit there, they do what they're told, and they will do the tiny tasks over and over and over and then go home without complaining. They are most unlikely to complain or cause a fuss. They will simply do what they're told. That is why. That's the model that we want here in America for boys.
So you've got...
Okay, what other countries on planet Earth have a superior model? He's unable to name any.
Higher agreeableness, a little bit higher on average conscientiousness. I mean, you know, you look at the rates in schools at the moment and girls are out achieving boys when the Title IX and some adjustments have been made to the way that the education system works.
So Adam Lane Smith, as part of his business strategy, aims at the red pill community.
And I think it is plain that the current version of schooling that you have is more suited to a female nature, or you could, in reverse, say that...
Okay, what other types of schooling are producing superior results?
Female nature is more suited to the current iteration of schooling. There is a conspiracy out there that says that school has been purposefully sort of reprogrammed to make it more difficult for boys, I would be much more tempted to presume that it's just it's not a coordinated effort to keep boys down by the school system. It's simply the way to have the most peaceful sort of classroom, and each individual teacher is optimizing for the most peaceful classroom, which is the one where students aren't doing things with their hands, where they're not running around outside, where there's easily structured timetables, homework as opposed to exams.
Usually having a peaceful situation is in the best interests of most everybody concerned. Right? You really think education would be improved by having less peaceful classrooms?
All of these sorts of things, they are done out of convenience, not out of malign.
Right. Many of my teachers regarded me as the most challenging student they ever had. They did not mean that as a compliment. I don't think that was in their best interests or in the classroom's best interests that I was so out of control with my, I guess, anti-authority reflexes. Everyone would have been better off if I'd been medicated for ADHD.
Coordination.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's enough idiocy in the world without bringing malice into it.
It's okay to be sad. That doesn't mean you're depressed. It's okay to be worried. That doesn't mean you're anxious. It's okay to experience trauma. That doesn't mean you have PTSD. Not everything is a diagnosable issue.
So many people hide behind a diagnosis and say, I never have to get better. This is one of the biggest things with.
And then other people find a diagnosis incredibly useful, a spur to get better. Right? There's nothing that inherently always works for the good. Right? But plenty of people benefit from a diagnosis. Right? People often benefit from clarity, from labels. People often benefit from some simplified model for reality, and a diagnosis of mental health disorder is a simplification of reality, and that's how models work.
With attachment issues too. People take an attachment styles quiz and say, oh, I'm anxious attachment. I will be that for the rest of my life. Absolutely not. That is the medical system that says you have a disease. We must treat you for the rest of your life.
The medical system doesn't say that you'll have an anxious attachment system for the rest of your life. Right? The United States has a pretty good medical system. Which other country do you think is doing it better? Right? The rest of the world gets to free ride on American medical innovation. New medications are overwhelmingly produced by American pharmaceutical companies.
You'll go through 10 years of therapy and take 5 medications. When I was working as a psychologist, as a psychotherapist, I did in-home treatment for people. And some of my clients were on 27 different medications at the same time. And I would ask them what they were for, and they would not know. And at least 12 to 15 of those medications would be psychological medications. Some of them were 4 or 5 different antidepressants, and then 3 or different anxiety medications, and then some for panic disorder, and then some for
Yeah, I'm sure some people are over-medicated, but I never hear this guy say anything positive about medication. So count me skeptical, even though I agree with so much of what he says. Right, being a guru is a social role. A guru is only a guru if there are people who regard them as such. Right, this guy obviously wants a following, and he holds himself up as the answer to so many problems that will often be better addressed through other modalities. I'm an Alexander Technique teacher, but I recognize for many problems such as with voice or with back pain that there's very likely another modality that will give you more quick relief or more lasting relief. Right? Alexander Technique is particularly demanding. It's not the best thing for everyone. Right? The social groups that gurus cultivate with themselves positioned as intellectual leaders will be reminiscent of cults. Key characteristic of cults is the establishment of clear in-group and out-group identities. Gurus tend to act in a manipulative fashion with their followers. This often takes the form of excessive flattery and intimations that their followers are more perceptive, more morally worthy, more interested in the pursuit of others. Gurus will wish to avoid the appearance of being a controlling leader. So they will often wistfully talk of a desire to engage with good faith critics who truly understand their ideas and lament that they have been unable to receive the robust criticism that they desire. So I'm just getting a guru cultishness from Adam Lane Smith, but might be entirely my own unprocessed issues with my late father. Back to this New Yorker article on objective morality.
Observation and a dose of evolutionary logic revealed male-bearing beetles not as attentive fathers, but as possessive mate guarders. The natural and behavioral sciences deflated my dreamy credo, exposing my lofty aspirations as performance and self-deception.
So if you study evolution, it will change how you view the world. You'll be less likely to attribute things to God and more likely to attribute things to your particular specialty. If you study attachment theory and try to develop your own information products to sell online and your own coaching programs to sell online, then you're going to sound like Adam Lane Smith and use your particular shtick as the solution for all sorts of problems that are better treated elsewhere. So if you're a lawyer, that will produce a certain perspective on life. If you're an accountant or a landscape architect or a professional athlete, or whatever you come to specialize in, will change how you experience life and how you view the world.
I struggled unsuccessfully to construct a new framework for moral behavior.
So how many clergy do you think tell their members of the congregation who come to them for help, oh, you'd be better off going with a therapist or with consulting a biologist on this? I'm sure some do, but most people tend to have an exaggerated sense of their own abilities and of the healing power of their own profession.
Which didn't look like self-interest in disguise. A profound cynicism took hold.
And let's
Skepticism
bring
about objective
Elliott
morality
Blatt
is nothing new, of
into
course.
the show. Mr. Blatt, what's going on, bro?
Hello.
Elliott. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I'm driving. I had a. So you were talking. I've forgotten. You were talking about silliness or the expression, the seek that.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So yesterday, I was thinking. It made me think that one thing. I used to be like deliberately like non-conformist when it didn't really need to be. You know, I did it as a sort of.
Wait! Can you stop that binging? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah,
Let's go.
I had to put my seatbelt on. Yeah. So like there was times when I could be. I would always be a little bit non-conformist as a sort of kind
Ego
of a
flex.
jab.
Yeah.
You know, just to poke people's ribs.
Yeah.
When it was totally unnecessary.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking, how many opportunities have I lost, by
Yes.
doing that?
Yes.
And the payoff was just non-existent, right?
It's
I
just
didn't
a delusion.
actually-
Yes.
Yeah, but the compulsion was just irresistible, nonetheless, And so it reminded me, my behaviors were my sort of non-conformity was really, on the lower end of things, compared to sort of big gaudy tattoos, which are on the higher end of things. And this came into play yesterday when I bought a book collection. All right, I saw this book collection on Facebook Marketplace, and it seemed like a good deal. And it was like 300 Batman books, or graphic novels is what they call them. And it reminded me, like, this guy had he probably had 320 books, and 300 of them were about Batman. Right?
Yeah.
And I just felt nauseous looking at this. And not to mention, so this guy was also really into lifting and tattoos, So he had this sort of giant hulking body with this little head sort of plucked on top of his body, He was just so oddly disproportionate. It reminded me of a comic book character. And it just seemed like somewhere along the line he had decided to sort of make a joke of himself.
Yeah.
Do you get that impression? So
yeah.
And then I remembered a thing you said about back in your days when you had roommates, and there would be like Pulp Fiction posters on the wall.
Yeah.
I don't know, but so I don't know. I was just reflecting on all of that, and but this is the norm. This type of behavior is the norm now. Everybody seems to want to rebel against something, but there's really not much to rebel against if you look at things from the big picture, like how easy people's lives actually are, and why not take this extra time and resource that you have and apply it to something better, more noble, But no, it's just decoration and egoism, narcissism. But anyway.
Yeah, I got a thought, Elliot. I've been walking around the campus of UCLA quite a bit over the past week, and almost everybody is slender. Almost nobody is obese. Almost nobody has any visible tattoos. Almost nobody has, gross piercings. And these are people who seem to be doing pretty well in life and have every reason to believe that life is going to continue to be really good for them. As opposed to when I ride public transport, where 70% of people are fat, so many people have weird tattoos and piercings. And so I think people who are able to bond with their family and then bond with other people, they're not driven to these weird pursuits and these weird missions to show that they are so much smarter than conventional ways of conventional mores for interacting with others.
Yeah. And, I'd like to be able to shake people out of this or talk to them about it, but these types of, underneath it all, there's like some sort of resentment. And it seems like resentment is the one vice that nobody will admit to.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like saying somebody's resentful, and they hear that, they're going to stonewall, and they're not going to be willing to hear it and take it in. And it's true of myself too,
Yeah.
But this is what sort of, and it just seems like if there's some sort of way to, some sort of language that people could use that we could like talk about resentment in a way that people don't find threatening, we might have a chance at a better society again.
And so many people are stuck in negative downward spirals of resentment where they're just engaged in self-destructive behavior. And if you've ever tried to tell someone in your life, look, I don't want to hear about your resentment against X anymore, it's not something that goes over well. And people they get stuck in this cycle where they just can't stop talking about how much they resent this person.
Yeah, and then they double and triple down on it. And I just had this experience with Joe, who I've completely blocked out of my life now.
Yeah.
After I learned one fact, and then I decided I need to cut all ties and, completely sever any association with this guy. And my only debate is whether or not to tell him why.
Yeah, don't. Just, I wouldn't say cut all ties. Like if he called me, I'd call him back. I'd just say dial it down, because Joe is a man of way above average intelligence. He has way above average charisma. He has so much potential, but he's certainly stuck in a downward spiral.
Yeah, I was in the dial down phase for a while, and then I just learned one thing that I just couldn't accept, some behavior he had engaged in.
Okay.
That just rubbed me the wrong way to such a degree that I just couldn't even, never wanted to be in his presence again.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, it's very hard to get me to that place,
Yeah. And how many good people have had their lives ruined because they did not separate from someone that they need to separate from? As I think out loud, you're absolutely right, because many good people you see on TV and in movies and in novels, their life is ruined because they have not sufficiently separated from somebody who's toxic.
Yeah. And I noticed, when he would text or call, it would just be this sinking feeling that would come over me,
Yeah. And
this was the barometer that I finally, decided that I was going to react to and take seriously, and it wasn't anything purely intellectual, there's like, your gut knows, bro.
Yeah.
You got to go your gut sometimes.
And another thing, another option is to say, Joe, I just need a 3-month break. I'm having such an intensely negative reaction to X, Y, Z. You know, I recognize your value as a human being, but I just need to take a 3-month break to detox from my very strongly negative reactions.
Yeah, it's a good idea. Maybe that's worth considering. Part of me really feels like I need to, like, you know, just lay it out in excruciating detail. I don't know. But yes, you're right,
that could change his life. It may be just what he needs to hear. I don't know. You have to listen to see if he can take it in as you begin.
Well, you know, I've been indirect, you know, for the longest time, and he'd made noises about seeming to understand what I was saying, but it seemed to have made no impact on his behavior. So I don't know. But anyway, since I've done this, I've noticed I've just had a lot more energy and a lot more initiative. And it was like I didn't realize, like, the hangover effect that just shaking off that toxicity had consumed from me. You know, just dealing with somebody that's really, you know, goes against your grain, it takes energy to sort of cleanse yourself of that. And energy is a precious commodity.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we have to go where the energy flows. That's how I live my life outside of my obligations. The people that I spend time with and the topics I talk about on a show, the only thing that probably coheres my show is that I go where my energy is flowing.
Yeah. Well, now that you're the master of your domain on your own show, as it were. Okay. I had something else, but it slipped my mind. Okay. So this the pager attack.
Yeah.
So it took me a while. I thought it was just a handful, and then I started seeing reports about the magnitude of it, and part of me is like, yay, rah rah, Hezbollah, I hate you, you're dead, and then I just think about, could I have been a Hezbollah fighter?
Yeah.
It's like your situations are such that it's not even an option for you, right?
Yeah.
But were these people in a position to sort of make a more moral choice, and therefore, were they legitimate targets? And I started second guessing things like that. And then I was listening to Dooovid on a stream, and he was very exercised and very upset about this attack. And in ways it didn't quite make sense to me, but in some ways they did make sense to me. How do you process this event morally?
Through in-group, out-group. This out-group Hezbollah is a deadly threat to my in-group, and so I am happy when they are slaughtered and maimed. On the other hand, I can intellectually understand that in different circumstances, if I was growing up in a different place, that I might very well have become associated or joined Hezbollah. But that doesn't change that my primary prism is through my own in-group is deadly threatened by this group. So I am thrilled that this group, who also blew up 240 American Marines, I am thrilled that they are maimed, because this wasn't just ordinary members of Hezbollah. They had to be battalion leaders and above. So the leaders of a terrorist organization got maimed and killed. Just overwhelmingly, I see as a fantastic thing, because when you're in a life and death struggle, then I think the in-group versus out-group prism is the most important.
Yeah, I accept that. I hear that. And the question I guess I'd have for Dooovid would be, is Hezbollah so moral that if they had the ability to do the same, do you think they would refrain?
Of course not. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's an example of that people hold Israel to just a much higher standard than they hold others.
Yes.
And if you present people with this, they just kind of go blank. They don't really have a response, and they seem to want to change the subject. Like if you're talking about your average sort of campus protester, and if you were to present them with that question, you wouldn't get a response.
Right. I noticed like the left-wing critiques was that it was illegal under international humanitarian law and that it was nihilistic. And I just don't I don't have empathy for those positions. We've got a life and death struggle going on. Why would a people who wants to survive not try to take out their enemy who's intent on committing genocide against them?
Yeah, for sure.
So
well,
were you persuaded by the analysis from Fahad that if we only had a Palestinian state, then all these different Arab and Muslim peoples would gladly live in peace with a Jewish state?
No, not at all. And my understanding is, from the many decades that I've been acquainted with this conflict, is that the Palestinians promise to do X if Israel does Y. Israel does Y, Palestinians fail to do X. Now, granted, I'm probably hearing a lot of propaganda, but my understanding is that the Palestinians don't have a very sparkling track record of living up to their agreements. These agreements are just tactics in a larger battle, but they're not, they're not sincerely meant. That's my understanding of Palestinian promises.
Yeah, we don't have a great record of Palestinian prosperity living in peace with other peoples, right? Instead, we've got a long track record of Palestinian terrorism, and we have a very small track record of Palestinians living in peace and just contributing to the greater good.
Yeah, for sure. Yes, absolutely. So I think we agree on this. Here, I'm at my next stop, so I think I have to
okay, bro.
depart. All right, blessings.
Okay,
All right, bye.
Take care. Blessings.
Michel de Montaigne in the 16th century remarked that nothing in all the world has greater variety than law and custom, a sign for him of the non-existence of universal moral truths. And he had...
And yet, everyone lives as though there are universal moral truths, right? Someone steals from you, someone deliberately steps on your toe, someone deliberately punches you in the face for no good reason on your behalf, right? You are going to react very strongly negatively.
Predecessors among the ancient Greeks. David Hume chimed in 2 centuries later to argue that judgments of right and wrong emanate from emotion and social conditioning, not the dispassionate application of reason. Even the more pious-sounding theorists, including Kant and Hegel, saw morality as something that we derive through our own thinking, our own rational will. The war between science and religion in the 19th century brought it all to a head as a supernatural worldview became supplanted by one that was more secular and scientific, in a development that Nietzsche described as the death of God.
Right, but how people develop a hero system isn't something that happens through science, right? It's something that they inherit from other people. Virtually nobody thinks through moral issues and comes to their own principles, right? We tend to inherit moral principles and a hero system from the people around us. What is the likely response of Hezbollah to the pager attack? Hezbollah will keep launching rockets at Israel. In response, Israel will kill more Hezbollah fighters, particularly their leaders.
As the pillars of Christian faith crumbled, Western morality seemed poised to collapse. Nihilism loomed.
That's not true. All right, we had the first secular societies in human history were the Protestant societies of Scandinavia, and they did not morally collapse, right? They maintained high standards of behavior. Who would God favor, Jews or Muslims? I would expect that God would favor whichever individuals most obey his directives. But in real life, right, I don't see significant moral differences between religious and secular people with the same IQ levels. So higher IQ people are more likely to have empathy and access to empathy and tend to have more reasons to behave in a way that is conducive to their own best interests, which will usually mean abstaining from illegal behavior.
But how did we do this? The madman in Nietzsche's The Gay Science asks, how could we drink up the sea? Who gave us the sponge to wipe away the entire horizon? What were we doing when we unchained the earth from its sun? Nietzsche's response to a godless world was a moral makeover. Individuals were to forge their own precepts and act in accordance with them.
This idea that individuals are going to forge their own precepts just bears no relationship to reality, right? We inherit precepts from people and communities that we admire and want to emulate. So when I was a Christian, I thought belief in God was the single most important thing in the world. Then I converted to Judaism. I became convinced that belief in ethical monotheism, that there was one God, his primary demand on us was ethical behavior, that was the most important. Then I saw how careless and selfish and how abhorrent much of my own behavior was, even though I was following through with some Jewish practices and participating in the Jewish community, but I was at the same time acting like a pig with regard to other people when I had some strong urge that I couldn't modulate in accordance with ethical aims. And so from my life experience, it's not ethical principles or ethical teachings, it's not books nor religion or charismatic clergy that primarily shape the decency with which people behave. I just notice in my experience of reality that people who love other people and are loved by them tend to behave in a more upstanding fashion, and people who don't have much love in their life, who don't have good relations with their family, who don't have a family, people who are isolated, who are the most dangerous. How did I convert to Judaism? It's not allowed unless your mother is a Jew. Not true. There have been people converting to Judaism for thousands of years, right? Most tribes have methods by which you can join the tribe. Judaism is a tribe, and there are methods by which you can join the tribe. Now, getting an Orthodox conversion is not easy, right? There are hoops that you have to jump through. On the other hand, it's not as demanding as getting a BA degree, right? You have to learn to assimilate to a particular Orthodox Jewish community and to abide by its precepts with regard to how you behave publicly, and you have to be able to form bonds and learn to live in intense community, which many people have not cut out for, right? Most people just want the freedom to do their own thing, and they don't want to be held accountable by an intense community. So Orthodox Judaism is a high-intensity religion. It makes many demands.
More than a century later, such forays have matured into an individualist morality that has become widespread. We behave morally, we often say, not because of doctrine, but because of our higher-order principles, such as resisting cruelty or
And what about the idea of a chosen people? Well, pretty much every people regards itself as occupying a special role in the universe, right? Pretty much every hero system is composed of loyalty to a particular people and to its unique gifts, and how this particular people, whether it's Armenians or Palestinians or Jews or Christians or the Japanese, right? Every people regard themselves as the center of the universe.
Holding the equality of all humans. Rather than valuing human life because an omnipotent Godhead commands it, or because our houses of worship instruct it, we do so because we believe it is right.
No, we behave in a way that will enable us to sustain and build loving relationships with those who are most important to us. It's not these abstract philosophical and theological issues that primarily shapes the behavior of ordinary people.
At its core, this view of morality assumes a kind of moral integrity. Although some people may embrace principles for self-interested ends, the story goes, genuine altruism is possible through reasoned reflection and an earnest desire to be ethical. I told myself a version of this story in the...
People are never purely selfish or unselfish, right? Everything we do is shot filled with many different motivations.
Rockies. Rummage through your soul and you can find personally resonant principles that inspire good behavior. The Harvard psychologist Lawrence Kohlberg...
Right, the effect of principles compared to the effect of loving people, it's overwhelmingly that you will be far more shaped by people you love than you will be by abstract principles.
Turned a model like this into scholarly wisdom in the 1960s and 70s, positioning it as the apex of the 6 stages of moral development he described. For the youngest children, he thought, moral goodness hinges.
So abstract worlds, right, are most attractive to high IQ people who enjoy spending time in an abstract world. And so intellectuals come up with all these abstract models for reality, which are frequently quite useful. But just because you live in an abstract world overwhelmingly and you live with these principles, it doesn't mean that they translate into a powerful shaper of human behavior when compared to a more commonsensical approach that John Mearsheimer describes very well and very powerfully in a book he published in 2018 called The Great Delusion, Liberal Dreams and International Realities. And so Mearsheimer writes, my view is that we are profoundly social beings from the start to the finish of our lives, and that individualism is of secondary importance. Liberalism downplays the social nature of human beings to the point of almost ignoring it, instead treating people largely as atomistic actors. Political liberalism is an ideology that is individualistic at its core and assigns great importance to the concept of inalienable rights. This concern for rights is the basis of liberalism's universalism, that everyone on the planet has the same inherent set of rights. This is what motivates liberal states to pursue ambitious foreign policies. The public and scholarly discourse about liberalism since World War II has placed enormous emphasis on what are commonly called human rights. This is true all around the world, not just in the West. Human rights, Samuel Moy notes, have come to define the most elevated aspirations of both social movements and political entities, state and interstate. They evoke hope and provoke action. Humans do not operate as lone wolves. We are born into social groups and societies that shape our identities well before we can assert our individualism. Individuals usually develop strong attachments to their group and are sometimes willing to make great sacrifices for their fellow group members. Humans are tribal at their core. The main reason for our social nature is that the best way for a person to survive is to be embedded in a society and to cooperate with fellow members of your tribe, your community, and your society rather than acting alone. Right? The group strategy will consistently defeat an individualist strategy. And despite its elevated ranking, reason is the least important of the 3 ways we determine our preferences. It's less important than socialization, it's less important than genetics. Right? The main reason that socialization matters is that humans have a long childhood in which we are protected and nurtured by our families and society, and we are exposed to intense socialization. Right? We only begin to develop our faculties in our teens. Right? We are not equipped to think for ourselves pretty much until about age 25. Right? By the time an individual reaches the point where his reasoning skills are well developed, right? That's the age which you can rent a car. Right? That's age 25. By the time you have gotten to 25, your family and your society have already imposed an enormous value infusion on you. The individual is born with innate sentiments that also strongly influence how he thinks about the world, right? So genetics and socialization are far more powerful for how we behave than the application of our reason, right? People have limited choice in formulating a moral code because so much of our thinking about right and wrong comes from inborn attitudes and from socialization.
Is on what gets rewarded and punished. For actualized adults, in contrast, right is defined by the decision of conscience in accord with self-chosen ethical principles.
And a question in the chat, does the Israeli state reflect the real morals of Judaism? Somewhat. So how the morals of any particular group will demonstrate themselves will vary depending on the circumstance. So Israel is fighting for its survival. If Israel were 25% more moral than it is right now, it would not survive. So it's all well and good to for Israel to strive to say be 5% moral than it is currently. But Israel's in a life and death struggle. And when you're in a life and death struggle, you have to put the highest priority on survival, not on your obedience to any particular abstract set of principles. But you will see significant differences between, say, Israeli attitudes and American attitudes. Israel is much more laissez-faire about sex work, because Judaism is more laissez-faire about the natural passions, including sex work. Israelis are much more emotional, wear their feelings on their sleeve, much more expressive, because Judaism places an emphasis on behavior, not on what's going on with your personal relationship with God. So Protestantism is non-ritualized religion, which is overwhelmingly about your personal relationship with God. And if you display anger, and if you display any of the natural passions too intensely, people will conclude that you're not truly saved. And so Protestants, people from Northern Europe, tend to be much more inhibited with their emotions. People from the Middle East, much more expressive.
Appealing to logical comprehensiveness, universality, and consistency. All this may sound abstract, but it is routine for most educated Westerners. Consider how moral arguments are made. Animal Liberation Now, 2023. The Princeton philosopher Peter Singer's reboot of his 1975 classic, Animal Liberation, urges readers to emancipate non-human animals from the laboratory and the factory farm. Singer assumes that people are committed to promoting well-being and minimizing suffering, and so he spends most of the book showing.
All right, comment in the chat from Jack. What I see in the media of killing babies, Israel killing babies, disturbs me. So name me one war where no babies were killed. Now, why would you hold Israel to a different standard than any other conflict? Right? In every single war, there have been babies that have been killed. There have been citizens that have been killed. There have been innocent bystanders that have been killed. That's the nature of war. Citizens will share the fate of their state. That's how it's been for hundreds of years. Why would you expect something different in this case? And if you hold Israel to a different standard of behavior than what you would hold the United States or England or France or Germany or any other nation state, then why would you do that? What's the foundation for that thinking?
First, that our actions create hellish existences for many of our non-human brethren. And second, that there is no principled reason to deny moral standing to fish or fowl. His belief in human goodness is so strong, he admits, that he expected everyone who read the original version of his book would surely be convinced by it and would tell their friends to read it.
So is Peter Singer worth taking seriously in morality? I don't believe so. And people who become vegetarians or vegans will often experience a substantial decline in health, in strength. They'll be much more likely to slip into depression, to have less sharp cognitive abilities. And so in that sort of situation, the normal person will leave the self-destructive nature of veganism and vegetarianism behind.
And therefore, everyone would stop eating meat and demand changes to our treatment of animals. From an evolutionary perspective, this could seem an odd expectation. Humans have been fashioned by natural selection to pursue sex, status, and material resources. We are...
Yes, but we're also evolutionarily encouraged to develop ties and bonds with other people, right? The release of dopamine and other brain chemicals when we have loving relationships with others, right? That's part of nature's bribe to ensure that we live lives deeply interconnected with other people, because other people will always be annoying and will always be a pain in the neck at times. And yet overall, life is much better when it's lived with people. And the brain chemical rush that we get when we have sex and we pair bond with someone, that's nature's bribe to ensure that we reproduce and take care of our offspring. I will talk to you, bloke.